If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon. Link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 21, The First Mission. Assigning Shishi Hashida as the team's medical ninja was Minato Namikaze's way of looking out for and protecting him. Shishi understood this well and immediately responded, "I'll take care of everyone's backs." Uchiha Shisui and Sani Kurama both smiled and said in unison, "We'll make sure to protect you too, Shishi." Seeing this interaction, Minato felt a sense of relief. The atmosphere was unexpectedly positive. Given the unique nature of this newly formed team, Minato decided not to conduct the traditional bell test, which is usually used to assess team cooperation. Instead, he directly announced their mission. "Earlier, when I met with the third Hokage, I received a mission. It seems that a summoning beast has appeared in the Forest of Death. Our task is to investigate and, if the summoning beast is confirmed, track it down and capture it if possible." Shisui asked, "Minato-sensei, do we have any more information about the summoning beast?" Minato shook his head, "No, we don't. The assumption is based on the disturbances caused by the wild animals in the Forest of Death, leading us to speculate that a summoning beast might be involved. Any more questions?" Shishi and the others shook their heads in unison. "Let's move out." With Minato's command, he took the lead and Shishi and the others quickly followed. For Shishi, the first day after graduation was clearly beyond his expectations. No bell test, straight into a high-stakes mission. If there truly was a summoning beast involved, could this mission be classified as a C rank? After all, the danger posed by a summoning beast could be on par with that of a ninja. The group swiftly left the core area of Konoha, reaching the entrance of the Forest of Death within minutes. The Forest of Death is full of wild beasts and poisonous insects, so be careful, Minato reminded them before leading the team inside. The ancient trees towered overhead, making the people below seem insignificant. The four of them moved through the forest, occasionally stopping to analyze traces left by the animals. Minato, Shisui and Sani did most of the talking, while Shishi listened intently, absorbing the information like a student in class. The three of them were clearly making an effort to guide him. Shishi humbly sought their advice, eagerly learning from them, gradually converting the theoretical knowledge he had acquired at the academy into practical experience. Through this tracking process, Shishi noticed that while Minato didn't say much, Shisui's skills in tracking were clearly superior to Sani's. Of course, Sani Kurama, who hailed from a clan known for their genjutsu, was also quite adept. Those who specialize in genjutsu often pay close attention to details. An hour later, the four of them landed on a thick tree branch. Shisui said, "Minato-sensei, it should be here." Sani Kurama added, "The traces of animal activity around here have noticeably decreased, and there are signs that they've been migrating outward. It seems this area has already been claimed as a territory by the summoning beast. Wild animals have territorial instincts, especially powerful ones. Summoning beasts are no exception." Minato nodded, "Based on the traces, this summoning beast appears to be a wildcat, with speed likely being its primary advantage, so everyone stay alert." Shishi and the others nodded in unison, "Yes, Minato-sensei." Minato gave a hand signal, and the four of them moved forward in a semicircular formation, closing in. Suddenly, Shisui signaled for them to stop, and Shishi and the others followed his gaze. On a tree branch, in a patch of sunlight filtering through the leaves, a black cat lay lazily, its tail swaying back and forth. Minato quickly signaled again. "Encircle it." Except for Shisui, Shishi and the others immediately moved to surround the black cat. However, the black cat was very alert. Before they could complete the encirclement, it sensed something, stood up, and with a meow, leaped in the direction of the gap in their formation, right where Shishi and the others had left an opening. "Stop it!" Minato shouted. Since their cover was blown, there was no need to be cautious anymore. In an instant, Shishi Hashida and the others surged forward with chakra bursting from their feet, each using the body flicker technique to pounce on the black cat. However, the cat's speed was astonishingly fast. At least, Shishi felt that he was no match for the cat in terms of speed, especially in this environment. But Minato Namikaze and the others were even faster. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Kunao flew through the air, embedding themselves with sharp thuds into the branches ahead of the black cat. They were thrown by Minato. The cat, startled, immediately changed direction. Just as Shishi saw the cat land on another branch, it abruptly changed course and leapt straight toward Uchiha Shisui. It's Genjutsu! Shishi noticed Sani Kurama lowering his hand. The next moment, Shishi saw Shisui and the cat lock eyes mid-air, and then the black cat fell limp, caught by Shisui. Sharingan! As impressive as ever. So Sani Kurama used the false surroundings technique, perhaps? So what is the technique used by Kurama Sanyo here? Shishi silently speculated. Minato smiled, excellent teamwork. Well, the mission is successfully completed. Let's head back. The four of them left the forest of death without any hesitation. However, Shishi noticed a new leaf on his tag tree. Tag, Tracking Expert. Condition to obtain, successfully track an enemy's whereabouts at least 5 times during missions. Effect, increases tracking talent by 100%, and sensitivity to traces by 100%. Another expert tag. Shishi was starting to feel numb to these now. But the conditions didn't seem too difficult, as this recent mission had already been counted toward the requirement. This meant he didn't have to track the enemy entirely on his own to succeed. Watching Minato and the others ahead, Shishi thought, Tracking Expert might be the easiest and quickest expert tag for me to acquire. Smiling to himself, Shishi caught up to Sani Kurama, walking alongside him and asking about Genjutsu techniques. Of course, he only asked about theoretical aspects and avoided specific jutsu. Sani, not one to be stingy, answered every question. Upon returning to the Hokage's office, Minato reported the mission and received the commission fee, distributing it afterward. Shishi immediately earned 6,000 RY. We're done for the morning. How about I treat everyone to some barbecue for lunch? Minato said with a smile as they left the Hokage building. Shishi and the others quickly thanked him and headed to the barbecue restaurant. On the way, Minato asked, Shishi, what's your next focus in training? Is it fire release? Although Minato hadn't personally witnessed Shishi using fire release, he had received information from the third Hokage. He knew that Shishi had managed to replicate the Great Fireball technique just by observing a classmate perform it, a clear sign of exceptional talent in ninjutsu. Fire release. Shishi shook his head. Minato-sensei, I've already mastered 5 fire release techniques, covering short, mid, and long range. For me, there's no need to learn more fire release techniques, given the chakra limitations. This statement surprised Minato and the others. Sani Kurama couldn't help but mutter to himself, are rookies this amazing nowadays? He had been graduated for over a year but hadn't mastered 5 genjutsu techniques. Minato nodded and continued, so your next focus will be on close combat and swordsmanship. He pointed to the Totsuka chakra blade at Shishi's waist. Shishi nodded, yes, Minato-sensei. Due to my chakra limitations, I believe I'll be engaging in close combat most of the time on the battlefield. And the overall physical conditioning is the foundation of a ninja's abilities, so my training will focus on enhancing my physical strength, taijutsu, ninja tools, and swordsmanship. Minato smiled approvingly, that's a very wise choice. Shisui then offered, if you need any help with ninja tools or swordsmanship, Shishi, don't hesitate to ask me. Sani Kurama also smiled, my taijutsu is decent, so I think I can manage as a sparring partner. Shishi, thick-skinned as ever, didn't hold back, then I'll be counting on you both from now on. Chapter 22, Minato Namikaze's Special Training. The barbecue lunch was thoroughly enjoyable, though it did eat up the mission reward Minato Namikaze had just received. There was no helping it. Minato didn't say anything, but Shishi Hashida and the other 2 were all big eaters. After lunch, the 4 of them arrived at a forest on the outskirts of Konoha village. Rest for an hour, Minato said before disappearing into the forest. Watching Minato vanish into the trees, Sani Kurama grinned, Shishi, how about a taijutsu match? Shishi Hashida readily agreed, no problem. Uchiha Shisui took on the role of referee. At his signal, Shishi and Sani clashed. As Shisui observed silently, he quickly noticed, Sani's moves are being completely read by Shishi. This kind of ability. The first thought that came to his mind was the dynamic vision of the Sharingan. Although Sani Kurama was 2 years older than Shishi, their hand-to-hand combat skills were surprisingly similar. Soon, Sani began using Kunao, and Shishi responded in kind. The sound of metal clashing filled the air. But the flow of the battle didn't change much. After about 5 minutes, Shishi and Sani stopped. Impressive. Sani gave Shishi a thumbs up, genuinely impressed, despite Taijutsu not being his strong suit. At this point, Shisui stepped forward, pointing out the flaws in both Shishi's and Sani's techniques, giving them a detailed analysis of their fight. As Shishi listened, he quickly realized that Shisui's combat intelligence was on a much higher level. After the review, Shishi immediately took the opportunity to ask Shisui for tips on using short swords. Before they knew it, an hour had passed. Minato reappeared and looked at the three, saying, "The next training exercise is to follow a designated route through this forest. The direction is straight behind me, go straight through." After saying this, Minato vanished once more. Sani immediately turned to Shisui, "Shisui, what should we do?" Shishi also looked to Shisui. Among the three of them, he was the strongest and most experienced. Shisui responded, "I'll take the lead. Sani, you stay in the middle, and Shishi, you take the rear. We'll advance in a single line formation." Both Shishi and Sani nodded in agreement. With Shisui leading the way, the three of them dashed into the forest. The moment they entered, Shisui activated his Sharingan. At the back of the formation, Shishi immediately entered a state of 100% focus. As for the 10x concentration boost from his scholar tag, he didn't dare to use it lightly due to the significant drain on his stamina. From his hidden vantage point in the forest, Minato watched the three as they moved. Suddenly, he used a kunai to cut a thin wire. In the next moment, a preset trap was triggered, sending a barrage of kunai and shuriken flying toward the three of them from the side. More specifically, Sani in the middle was the primary target, with the most kunai and shuriken aimed at him. "Watch out!" Shisui reacted first, stopping in his tracks and shouting a warning as he hurled a kunai forward. Sparks flew in the forest, accompanied by the sharp clanging of metal. Shisui's single kunai deflected 4 or 5 of the incoming weapons aimed at Sani. Shishi wasn't far behind, reacting a split second later. But he was better prepared, launching 2 kunai with both hands, intercepting 2 shuriken headed their way. Shishi Hashida and Uchiha Shisui quickly moved closer to Sani Kurama, both drawing their blades. At the same time, Sani held a kunai in each hand. In the next moment, a barrage of projectiles rained down on them. The three of them swung their weapons, deflecting the incoming attacks amidst a chorus of clashing metal. Sani inwardly chuckled bitterly. Had he become the weak point of the team? After clearing the first hurdle, the trio continued forward. Not long after, Shisui's ears twitched as he shouted, "Shishi!" Shishi immediately heard the whistling of projectiles behind him, stopping in his tracks and turning around to see a dense volley of weapons headed their way. This time, instead of drawing his sword, he quickly retrieved 2 kunai while biting down on a senbon needle. Activating 200% focus, he spun his arms like windmills, using the kunai to deflect the barrage of weapons. Behind him, Shisui and Sani also had their hands full as projectiles came at them from both the front and the sides. The three of them formed a back-to-back formation, working together to fend off the assault. When the attack finally ended, a variety of projectiles lay scattered in front of each of them. Shishi's kunai were chipped, and the senbon he had been holding in his mouth had been spat out at the last second to block a shuriken. The intensity of this training was worlds apart from their time at the Ninja Academy. A single mistake could lead to serious injury. Shisui and Sani weren't much better off. Sani even had 2 cuts on his arm. Shishi quickly checked the wounds and smiled, "Just scratches." Covering the wounds with his hands, he used the simplest healing technique, and within a minute, the wounds were healed. The three of them resumed their journey, this time adopting a triangular formation. They encountered explosive tag traps and ambushes from Minato's shadow clones before finally making it through the forest to the other side. Once they stopped, all three were breathing heavily. Shishi was still shaken. They hadn't noticed the explosive tag trap until it was nearly too late, reminding him of how Nawaka had died in an explosion trap. The ninja world was far more dangerous than he had imagined. He also realized more clearly that the hierarchy among ninjas wasn't just about strength, there were deeper reasons at play. "You all did very well," Minato said, appearing with a smile. "Rest for an hour." The three of them immediately sat down, pulling out water and food from their packs to replenish their strength. An hour later, Minato created 3 shadow clones and said to them, "Each of you will face one of my clones in a fight. Treat it as if it were an enemy you need to kill." "Yes, Minato-sensei," they responded in unison before each took on a clone, attacking with full force. Minato stood a short distance away, observing. He had been watching his 3 students closely since their mission that morning. This afternoon's training was also a way for him to gauge their abilities. Shisui is the strongest. He has a keen mind, the powerful insight and genjutsu of the Sharingan, and excellent skills in the body flicker technique and swordsmanship. He also has the most experience and is fully capable of becoming a Chunin. Sani excels in genjutsu. His taijutsu and experience are lacking, but he has the potential to become a Chunin. As for Shishi, his fire release hand seals were so fast that even I couldn't see them. Is it a concealed seal, or perhaps no seals at all? What an astonishing talent for fire release! And his reaction speed is extraordinary. Lord Third wasn't exaggerating at all. Minato analyzed quietly, planning how best to teach each of them according to their strengths. In terms of technique, there wasn't much he could teach Shisui. The Sharingan had its own unique system, so his role would be to help Shisui gain more combat and mission experience. For Sani, aside from improving his taijutsu, the focus would also be on gaining combat and mission experience. The Kurama clan had an impressive heritage in genjutsu. As for Shishi. Chapter 23, Leaving the Village. When Minato Namikaze looked at Shishi Hashida, his first thought was about the Flying Thunder God technique. For someone outside the Uchiha clan to have such extraordinary reflexes, Shishi was indeed a promising candidate for mastering the Flying Thunder God. Of course, mastering this technique required not only exceptional reflexes but also a strong sense of perception and spatial awareness. But it's too early for that, Minato thought with a smile. Shishi was only 6 years old, while Shisui Uchiha and Sani Kurama were just 8. For now, they needed to focus on building a solid foundation, gaining combat experience, and completing missions. The first day after graduation passed quickly. The next day, the morning was spent on another mission, helping villagers near Konoha deal with wild animals that were destroying their crops. This time, it was a group of wild boars. Following the tracks, Shishi and the others quickly located and dispatched them. This mission brought Shishi just 3 tasks away from unlocking the tracking expert tag. The afternoon was once again dedicated to Minato's special training traps, shadow clone battles, and taijutsu guidance. To Shishi's surprise, this pattern continued for an entire week. Morning missions, afternoon training. Before he even had a chance to leave Konoha, Minato had helped him unlock the tracking expert tag. With a 100% increase in tracking talent and a 100% increase in sensitivity to traces, Shishi's progress in both missions and training became visibly faster. March 24, year 39 of the Konoha calendar. As usual, the team gathered on the rooftop. However, when Minato arrived, he announced, "Today's mission is a C-rank mission outside the village. Meet at the village gate in half an hour." Understood. Shishi and the others replied in unison before using the body flicker technique to disperse. At home, Shishi quickly packed his gear into his backpack. Kunao, shuriken, a medical kit, soldier pills, a change of clothes, as well as explosive tags and grenades. After packing, with some time to spare, Shishi went to Konoha Hospital and Tenka's shop to bid farewell to Yakushi Nono and Tenka. When he arrived at the village gate, Minato and the others were already there. However, Shishi wasn't late. "Let's move out," Minato ordered as soon as Shishi arrived. The 4 of them left Konoha and headed south along the main road. Before long, they veered off the path leading to the daimyo's residence and entered the forest, moving southwest. As they leaped through the trees, Minato explained the mission. "Our target this time is a group of bandits based on the border of the Land of Rivers. These bandits have crossed the border into the Land of Fire multiple times, attacking villages in the area." Shisui immediately sensed something was off. The border has ninja team outposts. If they've managed to cross the border and raid villages multiple times, it means they've figured out the patrol routes of the border ninja teams. A C-rank mission? This was likely more than that. Shishi Hashida thought, even if ordinary bandits had ninjas among them, it wouldn't be enough to consistently figure out the patrol routes of the border ninja squads and manage to infiltrate and return to the Land of Rivers each time. Sani Kurama commented, "So, Shishi, are you suggesting that these bandits might be disguised ninjas?" Shishi replied, "That's a possibility. But if that's the case, this mission might not be for us. There's another possibility, the bandits could indeed be ordinary bandits, maybe with just 1 or 2 lower-ranked rogue ninjas among them. However, they might have precise intelligence support." Minato Namikaze smiled, "Shishi's analysis is very good." Shisui Uchiha asked, "Minato-sensei, if that's the case, where would their intelligence come from?" "From a Megakure. Before the Second Shinobi World War, the land of rivers was within a Megakure's sphere of influence, and the missions there were managed by a Megakure. After the war, a Megakure's influence was limited to the land of rain, while the land of rivers missions were divided between us and Tsunagakure. So, it could be that a Megakure wants to make a comeback, or Tsunagakure wants to take over all the missions in the land of rivers. Minato nodded and asked, "So, Shisui, which possibility do you think it is?" Shisui thought for a moment and said, "Tsunagakure." Kurama asked, "Shisui, why Tsunagakure?" Hands of the Salamander from a Megakure is known as a legendary shinobi. It wouldn't be surprising if he wanted to make a comeback and take over the land of rivers. Shishi analyzed, but if it were Hands, he would be facing us and Tsunagakure. That wouldn't be a wise move. Tsunagakure, on the other hand. It has been quite some time since the Second Shinobi World War. Their ambitions may have reignited, and it wouldn't be surprising if they wanted to take over the entire land of rivers. And the current situation fits Tsunagakure more. Kurama was puzzled and asked, "Why is that?" Shishi explained, "Because if it were Hands from a Megakure, he wouldn't need to use such methods. He could just send people south to reclaim the land of rivers directly. Tsunagakure, however, might not have the determination to confront us directly, so they might use such methods instead. This bandit group might not be simple." Shisui quickly asked, "Shishi, are you saying there might be other issues with these bandits?" Shishi replied, "It's just a guess. For instance, if these bandits have legitimate identities in the land of rivers, and we deal with them there, the land of rivers daimyo might be displeased and deteriorate relations with the land of fire and Konoha. At that point, Tsunagakure could easily align with the daimyo of the land of rivers and take over all the missions there." Kurama was astonished. How did you come up with this, Shishi?" Shisui was also surprised. Minato was equally astonished, as Shishi's final analysis was something he hadn't considered yet. Of course, he was aware of the hidden aspects of this mission. The third Hokage was right. Shishi's level of maturity in thought is on par with that of an adult. His insights are precise, and his analytical abilities are remarkable. Minato marveled privately and then said to Shishi and the others, "Shishi's analysis is excellent. It looks like this mission won't be too simple. Therefore, we need to be extra cautious once we enter the land of rivers. After we find the bandits, the first step is to thoroughly investigate their situation." Shishi and the others responded in unison, "Yes, Minato-sensei." They set off at 9 am, rested for 2 hours at noon. By evening, Shishi and the team reached the border of the land of fire but did not immediately cross. Instead, they set up camp at the border. Early the next morning, after having a meal of fish soup, the four crossed the border and entered the land of rivers. Chapter 24, Intelligence. After entering the land of rivers, following Konoha's intelligence, Shishi Hashida and his team found a cave on a mountain. It seemed to have been inhabited in the past. Judging by the traces, it's been at least a month since someone was here, Shisui Uchiha observed. Shishi scanned the cave and then volunteered, "Minato-sensei, I'll go check outside." Minato Namikaze nodded, "Sani, go with Shishi." Sani Kurama quickly nodded, "Yes, Minato-sensei." The two of them left the cave to investigate the surrounding area. Before long, Shishi reached the top of the mountain and gazed southward. He raised an eyebrow and then took a monocular from his backpack to look down at the valley. "There's a village down there. There are a lot of people, but the fields seem somewhat neglected." Shishi frowned slightly. He noticed women and elderly people working in the fields but didn't see any young, able-bodied men. Looking closer at the village, there were children playing around, and occasionally, he could spot a few young men. "Are they just lazy?" Shishi put away the monocular, met up with Sani Kurama, and then rejoined Minato to report what he had discovered. Minato asked, "Shishi, do you suspect there's something unusual about that village?" Shishi nodded, "The information leading us to this hideout wasn't baseless. This place was likely a hideout for rogue ninjas, but it's now abandoned. And conveniently, there's a village just below. In fact, this would be an ideal location for a hideout." Sani added, "Judging by the traces around here, someone did live here for a long time. It's impossible for all signs of life to vanish within just a few months unless someone meticulously cleaned up, but it's clear that wasn't the case." Everyone understood Shishi's point. If this hideout belonged to rogue ninjas or bandits, then the village below might have been under their control in the past, possibly paying them tribute. This village could be a valuable source of information. Indeed, the village is a good place to gather intel, Minato concluded, making a quick decision. We'll start our investigation with the village. Sani suggested, the simplest method would be to bring someone back here and use genjutsu to interrogate them. Both he and Shisui had the skills to do so direct and straightforward. However, Shishi offered an alternative, perhaps we could gather information in a more discreet manner. Minato and Shisui understood Shishi's underlying concern that the village might be more complicated than it seemed, possibly with ties to external forces. After all, they had previously speculated that Tsunagaku might be involved. Shisui added, if we want to collect information covertly, it would be best to wait until nighttime. Entering during the day, even with a transformation jutsu, could easily raise suspicion. After all, gathering intel discreetly requires subtlety. Directly questioning the villagers would be too risky. A stranger entering the village would immediately arouse suspicion. Sneaking in at night, using genjutsu when everyone is asleep, would leave minimal traces, most of which the villagers would likely dismiss as a dream. Minato immediately decided, then we'll wait until nightfall to infiltrate the village. Shishi then suggested, Minato-sensei, maybe we could first familiarize ourselves with the village in a simpler way. Minato, Shisui, and Sani all turned to Shishi. Shishi smiled, and in the next moment, he transformed into a black cat. Minato Namikaze immediately recognized the black cat. It was the same stray cat from their first mission a few days ago. Shisui Uchiha's eyes lit up as he smiled, Shishi's idea is indeed clever. A stray cat in this area shouldn't raise any suspicions. Minato nodded with a smile, that's true. Meanwhile, Shishi Hashida felt a bit strange inside because he had just triggered a new tag. Tag, Transformation Master. Condition to obtain, achieve 100 different forms of transformations, meeting the required standards. Effect, able to change into countless forms, transform into a bird to fly, a fish to swim. The effect was impressive, but the difficulty was also daunting. Humans count as one form, and cats as another. He had already met the requirements for the human form, but not for the cat. While his cat form had no visible flaws, his lack of knowledge about feline behavior could easily expose him. But in reality, just achieving 100 different transformations forms was already an extraordinary feat. Releasing the transformation jutsu, Shishi turned to Shisui with a smile, Shisui, you probably know cats better than I do. Minato also looked at Shisui, Shisui, I'll leave this task to you. Understood. Shisui nodded. Minato then turned to Sani Kurama, Sani, you'll be responsible for supporting Shisui. Sani quickly responded, yes, Minato-sensei. Shisui and Sani immediately set off. However, instead of entering the village right away, Shisui transformed into a stray cat and moved through the forest, quickly finding a group of raccoons. Shisui then transformed into a raccoon and mingled with the group, allowing himself to pick up the scent of the wild raccoons. The drawbacks of the ordinary transformation jutsu are numerous, not only in chakra but also in scent, which is difficult to alter. Shisui compensated for this by using alternative methods. Shishi observed this and couldn't help but silently give Shisui a thumbs up. He had learned something valuable. If he wanted to unlock the transformation master tag, mastering animal transformations would be a significant advantage. Back in the cave, Shishi practiced using senbon needles, and before he knew it, it was already noon. Shisui and Sani returned together. Minato-sensei, Shishi's earlier speculation was completely correct, Shisui reported, clearly astonished, and then relayed the gathered information. Although it was just bits of overheard conversation, they had confirmed that the village below housed 2 rogue ninjas who also led the bandits. Almost all the able-bodied men in the village were their subordinates. Moreover, the 2 rogue ninjas indeed had a source of intelligence. They were scheduled to meet their contact tonight, with plans to act the following day. After Shisui finished his report, the cave fell into silence. The village was a bandit stronghold, responsible for significant harm to the Land of Fire. Revenge seemed inevitable. But it was still a village. Would they target only those who had raided the Land of Fire, or would they root out the problem entirely? What a messed up world! Shishi sighed inwardly. He had heard of similar situations in his previous life, but now, faced with the reality, if he were to seek revenge in the village, would he kill everyone or just the able-bodied men? Would he carry that burden in his heart? Minato's gaze swept over the 3 of them before he said, for now, we won't concern ourselves with the village. We'll split into 2 teams to keep an eye on those rogue ninjas. Yes, Minato-sensei. The 3 of them quickly composed themselves and responded in unison. Shishi and Minato formed one team, while Shisui and Sani formed the other, and they began closely monitoring the village. It was a long process. By late night, the 2 rogue ninjas finally left the village and headed west. Shishi and the others immediately followed, keeping a safe distance behind. Chapter 25, Strike. Under the moonlight, by a riverbank, 2 rogue ninjas finally met with a contact. In the forest, Shishi Hashida and his 3 companions silently observed. The contact didn't display any obvious signs of being a Suna ninja. Instead, he appeared to be a wandering samurai. The distance was too great to hear what they were saying, and Shishi didn't know how to read lips. Within 5 minutes, the meeting concluded. As the rogue ninjas began to head back, Shishi and the others quickly concealed themselves. In the darkness, Minato Namikaze used hand signals to communicate. Track the contact. However, the contact, who resembled a wandering samurai, was very cautious and ran downstream along the river. Shishi and the others followed through the forest. After covering nearly 10 miles, Minato used hand signals again to issue a new command. Strike! They split into 2 groups again. Shishi and Minato moved ahead to intercept, while Shisui Uchiha and Sani Kurama dove into the river to chase the target. As soon as the command was given, Shisui and Sani changed direction, rushing out of the forest and into the river, sprinting across the water's surface to pursue the wandering samurai. The samurai, sensing their presence, glanced back under the moonlight. Konoha 2 kids. Realizing that someone might be moving ahead to cut him off, the samurai sneered, "You're underestimating me." Without hesitation, he turned and charged toward Shisui and Sani, intent on dealing with the 2 kids first. In the forest, Minato immediately led Shishi in a charge towards the fight. Shisui and Sani came to an abrupt halt. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Shisui hurled several shuriken, while Sani quickly formed hand seals. The samurai deftly dodged the flying shuriken, but Shisui suddenly tugged on the thin steel wire attached to the shuriken, causing them to change direction and converge on the samurai from 3 different angles. At the same time, Sani completed his jutsu. Genjutsu, Mirage Technique. This genjutsu distorted the target's vision, making what they saw differ from reality. At that moment, Sani aimed to disrupt the samurai's perception of the shuriken's trajectories. The samurai drew his sword, slicing through the wire and deflecting 2 of the shuriken, but he missed the 3rd. Thud! The shuriken lodged into the samurai's right arm, blood spilling out and staining the river red. The agonized scream of the samurai echoed loudly in the stillness of the night. Damn it! Breaking free from the genjutsu, the samurai roared in anger, the water beneath his feet exploding as he leaped into the air, bringing his sword down towards Shisui. Retreat! Shisui and Sani quickly withdrew. The wandering samurai missed his strike and was about to pursue when he heard the sound of something cutting through the air. Turning his head, he saw a kunao flying toward him. His pupils dilated in shock as he stumbled, the kunao barely missing his face. But before he could feel relieved about dodging the attack, a figure appeared in front of him, catching the kunao mid-air. You! The samurai was stunned. Before he could finish speaking, Minato Namikaze's powerful punch cut him off, sending him flying off the river's surface. As he fell, Shishi Hashida arrived just in time, landing a whip-like kick that sent the samurai crashing into the river with a loud splash, knocking him out cold. Shishi quickly retrieved the unconscious samurai from the river and brought him to the shore. The interrogation that followed was naturally led by Shisui Uchiha. Even with just a single Tomo Sharingan, Shisui's genjutsu abilities surpassed those of Sani Kurama. After enduring a beating, the wandering samurai's willpower was severely weakened, and it took less than 10 minutes for Shisui to extract the information. The man turned out to be a Suna ninja, a Chunin named Tonegawa Ry. Moreover, he wasn't working alone. His mission involved a 4-man team. The other 3 members consisted of 1 Jonin and 2 Chunin. The Jonin from Suna was a seasoned veteran, while the 2 Chunin were censor-type ninjas. The bandits led by the rogue ninjas were receiving intelligence from this Suna team. Their goal aligned closely with what Shishi had previously speculated. Those 2 rogue ninjas had originally enslaved the small mountain village until they were discovered by Tonegawa Ry's team. They then recruited the village's young men as forced labor, with Suna providing intelligence to help them cross the border and raid the Land of Fire. After just one operation, the young men of the village were completely trapped in the cycle. As a result, the two rogue ninjas moved into the village, abandoning their mountain hideout. Suna's goal was to use this bandit group to stir conflict between the Land of Fire and the Land of Rivers, creating an opportunity for Suna to take over missions in the Land of Rivers. The bandits were set to act again tomorrow, but this time Suna had deliberately fed them false information. They were going to run straight into a Konoha border patrol squad. A battle would ensue, the bandits would be defeated, and Konoha would discover the bandits' hideout, leading to a massacre in the village. Even if Konoha and the Land of Fire managed to restrain themselves, they would inevitably hold the Land of Rivers accountable. Of course, there was a risk that Suna would be exposed during this operation. Therefore, Tonegawa Ry and his team would also take action tomorrow, planning to kill the two rogue ninjas amidst the chaos and dispose of the bodies. Tsunagakure is truly despicable. Sani Kurama said angrily. Shishi and Shisui nodded in agreement. The plan was indeed vicious, low-cost, high-reward, and not particularly difficult to execute. With the current calm in the shinobi world, Konoha's patrols along the Land of Fire's borders were relatively lax, making it easier for Tsunagakure to exploit the situation. Minato Namikaze looked down at the unconscious Tonegawa Ry and thought before raising his head to ask the three young shinobi, "What do you think we should do next?" Sani immediately replied, "Minato-sensei, we should take down his comrades as soon as possible, preferably capturing them alive. We should also notify the border patrol squad and leave the rogue ninjas alive. With this evidence, we can present it to the Daimyo of the Land of Rivers, showing him Tsunagakure's ambitions and pushing him to fully align with Konoha." Minato turned to Shisui. "I agree with Sani," Shisui said. "If Tonegawa Ry doesn't return in time, Suna will definitely suspect something is wrong." Minato nodded, then looked at Shishi. Having already thought it through, Shishi said, "We should capture the Tsunagakure team, inform the border patrol, and report the situation to the third Hokage. Since this mission involves the Land of Rivers and Tsunagakure, only the third Hokage can decide how to handle the situation." Minato's eyes reflected approval, though he didn't express it outright. He said, "We'll split into two groups. Shisui, Sani, Shishi, you three take Tonegawa Ry back to the Land of Fire's border and assist the patrol squad in capturing the rogue ninjas and bandits alive if possible." Sani was startled. "Minato-sensei, you're going alone?" Shishi smiled and said, "Sani, let's follow Minato-sensei's orders. We should trust in our sensei's strength." Minato smiled, "All right, it's decided." He then took out a specially made Flying Thunder God Kunao and handed it to Shisui. "Shisui, take this. I'll return as quickly as possible." Chapter 26, Hiruzen Sarutobi's Choice. The team split into two groups. Uchiha Shisui carried the prisoner on his back while Shishi Hashida and the others bid farewell to Minato Namikaze under the moonlight. They then retraced their steps, eventually stopping to rest at the foot of the mountain where the rogue ninja's hideout was located. Sani Kurama, still worried, said, "Shisui, are we really okay letting Minato-sensei handle a Jonin and Tujnin all by himself?" Uchiha Shisui remained silent, fully aware of the reason behind Sani's concern. Their previous team leader and another teammate had perished during a mission when their squad had split into two groups. It was during that mission that Shisui had awakened his Sharingan. Shishi Hashida, observing Sani's anxious expression and Shisui's silence, thoughtfully said, "Sani, Minato-sensei's plan is the most suitable. With this prisoner, we need at least two people to carry him. If we divided into pairs, anyone who went with Minato-sensei might become a burden to him. So, the best strategy is for the three of us to stay together while Minato-sensei operates alone. As for Minato-sensei's strength, you might not have noticed during the fight earlier, but his speed with the Flying Thunder God technique is unparalleled in the entire shinobi world. Even if he were outmatched, it would be easy for him to retreat alone." After hearing Shishi's analysis, Shisui smiled and said, "Shishi is right, Sani. We need to trust in Minato-sensei." Realizing that Shishi's reasoning was sound, Sani shook off his worries and said, "Then let's hurry to our destination." Half an hour later, the three continued on their journey, taking turns carrying the prisoner. After another hour, they crossed the border and located a Konoha patrol squad. They explained the situation to the Jonin leading the patrol. This Jonin, named Sakai Itsuki, immediately instructed his three subordinates, "Shinichi, you three head out at once and notify the other two squads." The border was long, so naturally, there was more than one patrol squad in the area. There were three, totaling 12 people. All they could do now was wait. Reflecting on the day's events, Shishi closed his eyes to rest and conserve his energy. Suddenly, Sannie's voice broke the silence. Shisui, what do you think the third Hokage will decide? Shishi immediately opened his eyes and looked at Shisui, who was leaning against a tree across from him. This situation involves 3 countries. The third Hokage will likely be extremely cautious, Shisui replied. After all, it hasn't been long since the Second Shinobi World War ended. From his perspective, he didn't want to see another major war break out. However, this mistake was entirely on Tsunagakure's part, and Konoha had already caught them red-handed. There was no way the Land of Rivers would side with Tsunagakure. The only concern was whether Tsunagakure would dare to start a war over this. At that moment, Sannie asked another question, what do you think will happen to that village? Shisui was taken aback, not because he hadn't considered it, but because he subconsciously didn't want to think about it. The third Hokage will likely leave that to the Anbu, Shisui finally answered, then looked at Shishi and asked, Shishi, what do you think? Shishi pondered for a moment and said, since it involves 3 nations, the third Hokage will certainly be very cautious. As you said, it hasn't been long since the Shinobi World War ended. Neither we nor Tsunagakure want another war, especially one that might give Omegakure an advantage. After all, the Land of Rivers had been snatched from Omegakure's grasp. Right now, we have the upper hand, and there's a good chance we can secure the Land of Rivers. Shishi paused, then added, as for that village, it might be handled by Root. Technically speaking, Root was also part of the Anbu. However, in Shishi Hashida's eyes, Root was Root, and the Anbu were the Hokage's direct subordinates. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, could dismiss Danzo from his position as the leader of Root with a single command, but in reality, Root remained under Danzo's control. Danzo had placed curse marks on the key members of Root. Although both the Anbu and Root handled the dirty and exhausting tasks, Shishi felt that Root was more likely to be involved in this situation. But what would Danzo do? The atmosphere grew tense. A 6-year-old and 2 8-year-olds were already being forced to confront a darkness more terrifying and torturous than death itself. Before they knew it, the sun began to rise in the east. After eating their rations in the morning, Shishi and the others were assigned patrol duties by Jainin Sakai Itsuki. Meanwhile, Minato Namikaze had already returned to the Hokage Tower, where he reported the details of the mission and the intelligence they had gathered to Hiruzen Sarutobi. In fact, when he returned to Konoha, he had brought along a prisoner, the Jainin from Tsunagakure, who had since been handed over to Konoha's interrogation unit. They would do everything they could to extract any valuable information from the prisoner's mind, whether it pertained to Tsunagakure's plans or other secrets. Given that this situation involved 3 countries, 2 ninja villages, and possibly even a Megakure, Hiruzen Sarutobi couldn't help but furrow his brow. However, this was indeed an opportunity to monopolize the missions in the Land of Rivers. The only concern was whether Tsunagakure would declare war as a result. Or perhaps they might even ally with Hanzo. After some thought, Hiruzen Sarutobi finally said, Minato, your handling of the situation was very appropriate. Go and regroup with Shishi and the others. Capture those rogue ninja and hand them over to Root. Let Root handle the rest. This decision was not unexpected for Minato, and he immediately nodded. Yes, Lord Third Hokage. With that, Minato vanished from where he stood. At the Fire Country border, Shishi Hashida and the others had just completed a patrol and were taking a rest when Minato Namikaze suddenly appeared beside Uchiha Shisui. Minato-sensei. The 3 were pleasantly surprised. Minato glanced at them and smiled, looks like I made it in time. At that moment, a signal flare shot into the sky. Shishi couldn't help but smile. You arrived just in time, Minato-sensei. The bandits were coming. The 4 of them immediately sprang into action, disappearing from their resting spot. Moments later, when Shishi and the others arrived at the battlefield, the fight was already over. Aside from the 2 rogue ninja, 10 villagers were also lying unconscious on the ground. Nihonjin no Jutsu? Temple of Nirvana technique. Shishi speculated silently. Soon, the other 2 patrol squads arrived, and Minato promptly relayed the orders from the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. After hearing the orders, Sakai Itsuki smiled and said, in that case, I'll leave these prisoners to you, Minato. Minato responded immediately, as it should be. The 3 patrol squads then dispersed to resume their duties and to establish new patrol routes. Once Sakai Itsuki and the others had left, Minato said, tie these people up first. Later, Shisui, you and I will head to the land of rivers to bring back the other 2 Tsunagakure prisoners. Yes, Minato-sensei. Chapter 27, Shisui's Choice. Route moved quickly, arriving at the border by noon. There were 2 squads in total, all wearing animal masks and black cloaks, except for the leader. However, the leader's identity shocked Shishi Hashida to the core. Orochimaru. Snake bastard. Has he, she/it, already joined Route this quickly? Upon seeing Orochimaru, Minato Namikaze immediately stepped forward and bowed in respect. Orochimaru-sama. Minato. Orochimaru's gaze swept over the prisoners on the ground. Are these the only ones? Minato replied, 2 from Tsunagakure, 2 rogue ninja, and the rest are villagers from that village. Orochimaru nodded, then turned his eyes toward Shishi Hashida and his 2 companions, showing a look of interest. But whether it was Shishi, Shisui Uchiha, or Sani Kurama, they couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. The cold, menacing aura that Orochimaru exuded, combined with his gaze, gave the 3 of them the feeling of being watched by a venomous snake. Nevertheless, the 3 had no choice but to step forward and bow. Orochimaru-sama. Orochimaru withdrew his gaze and, with a smile, looked at Minato. You have some impressive students. A genius from the Uchiha clan, a member of the Kurama clan, and a renowned civilian prodigy. Orochimaru had already reviewed their profiles before arriving. Minato, lend me one of your students to guide us to that village. Orochimaru's words made Minato's expression change slightly. Just as he was about to speak, Orochimaru added, Minato, you need to stay here to ensure these prisoners don't escape. I only need one person to lead the way. Don't worry, nothing will happen. Minato found himself unable to argue and instead looked at Shishi and the other 2 with concern. At that moment, Shishi, Shisui, and Sani felt the deep malice emanating from Orochimaru. Evil. So evil. Fucking snake bastard. As Shishi looked at Orochimaru's smiling face, he also sensed the twisted amusement hidden beneath it. With the arrival of Root, the fate of that village seemed all too predictable. Whoever went to lead the way would undoubtedly witness something horrific. Perhaps even. Suddenly, Shishi noticed Orochimaru's gaze settle on him, causing his heart to pound. At that moment, Shisui stepped forward. Minato-sensei, I'll guide Orochimaru-sama. Sani let out a quiet sigh of relief but then felt a pang of shame. Shishi didn't try to step forward and instead watched as Minato nodded in agreement. Shisui then led Orochimaru and his men away. Sani hesitated as if wanting to say something but remained silent. The wind howled as Shisui Uchiha led Orochimaru and the others to the mountain north of the village, reaching the location in under an hour. That's the place, Shisui said. Orochimaru looked down at the village below and smiled. Are you planning to plead for them? Shisui was silent for a moment before shaking his head. According to the information we gathered earlier, during several raids into the Land of Fire, the able-bodied men from this village all participated. This was something Tsunagakure orchestrated. They may have been forced at first, but no matter the reason, everyone must pay the price for their actions. But the elderly, the women, and the children are innocent. Orochimaru smiled at this. Konoha is peaceful, and to win over the Land of Rivers, it will not harm the innocent. Shisui's face brightened with relief. However, Orochimaru's tone shifted as he added, but if they resist, then there's nothing to be done. Shisui's heart sank as he looked down at the village, at the elderly and women working in the fields, and at the children playing. He suddenly made a decision. Orochimaru-sama, please leave this matter to me. They're just ordinary people, there's no need for Root to intervene. Orochimaru's smile widened. Of course. Shisui took a deep breath, then leaped into the air like an eagle, diving down toward the village. Watching Shisui's figure, Orochimaru couldn't help but remark, the Uchiha clan, they're so naive. Then he issued an order, don't let anyone leave. Yes. The Root ninjas responded in unison and immediately vanished. In the village. Shisui drew his sword and swiftly entered a villager's home, slaying 2 men who were drinking inside. Blood splattered, staining the walls. One after another, Shisui's actions were swift and decisive. When he encountered children, he used genjutsu to put them all to sleep. In less than 5 minutes, all the able-bodied men in the village had been slaughtered by Shisui. Then he moved on to the men working in the fields. This time, the situation could no longer be hidden. Screams erupted, and villagers began fleeing in panic, but the men in the fields couldn't escape Shisui's pursuit. After killing the last man, Shisui, now drenched in blood, looked at the root ninjas who had entered the village to knock out the fleeing villagers and at the bodies strewn across the ground. His Sharingan grew even more vivid and sinister. Orochimaru noticed this and was surprised. He's showing signs of awakening the two-tomo Sharingan. Although he hadn't started researching the Sharingan, Orochimaru was familiar with this bloodline limit. He knew how the Uchiha awakened their eyes. According to the reports, Shisui had awakened his single Tomo Sharingan after the death of his squad leader and another comrade. But he hadn't expected Shisui to show signs of further awakening over a group of bandits and villagers he didn't even know. Interesting. Orochimaru smiled to himself, then approached and said, "You did well. Leave the rest to us. You may return." Shisui's eyes returned to normal, and he sheathed his short sword, bowing respectfully. "Yes, Orochimaru-sama." However, before leaving, Shisui couldn't help but ask, "Orochimaru-sama, what will happen to these villagers?" Orochimaru smiled. "They will be handed over to the daimyo of the Land of Rivers as evidence of Tsunagakure's misdeeds." Shisui was completely reassured by this and bowed again before leaping away. Orochimaru watched Shisui leave. A moment later, a root ninja appeared before him and respectfully asked, "Lord Orochimaru, the task is complete. What are your orders?" "Take all the children to laboratory number 2, and have the bodies preserved and sent to laboratory number 3. The root ninja immediately complied. Understood. Orochimaru hadn't lied to Shisui. These villagers would indeed be handed over to the daimyo of the Land of Rivers, but only their names. He was confident that the daimyo, eager not to provoke the Land of Fire and Konoha, would hand the villagers over to him for disposal. So, was it really a lie? Before returning to the Land of Fire, Shisui stopped by a river to wash away the blood and rid himself of the scent. Only then did he rejoin Shishi and the others, who didn't notice anything unusual. Chapter 28, Talent Realized. Root's movements were swift. By evening they reappeared and took away all the captives. With this, Shishi Hashida and his team's mission was successfully completed. Even though night had fallen, Minato Namikaze decided they should return to Konoha. However, before departing, he turned to Shishi and the other two and said, "Next, I have a small test for you. I will set off first. You will leave in half an hour and must accurately track my trail." Shishi Hashida and the others exchanged glances and nodded in unison. "Yes, Minato-sensei." Minato nodded, then vanished from sight. After watching Minato disappear into the forest, the three waited for half an hour before immediately setting off to track him. Unless Minato used the Flying Thunder God technique, he would leave many traces behind. In a dense forest like this, he would often use the tree branches for leverage. Shishi and his teammates followed the traces Minato left on the branches as he moved. However, 5 minutes later, they stopped in their tracks. In front of them were 4 sets of trails. 3 shadow clones. Kurama-sani scratched his head. In the darkness of night, it was extremely difficult to distinguish between the 4 sets of marks. Are we going to have to rely on luck? Each of us could choose a direction and use a shadow clone. Both he and Shisui Uchiha had mastered the shadow clone technique. Shisui shook his head at this. "Our shadow clones are not as strong as Minato-sensei's, they might not last long enough for us to realize we've taken the wrong path." Shishi nodded in agreement, then reached out to touch the marks, carefully sensing them. Shisui followed suit. After the two had finished examining them, Kurama-sani also touched the marks and then looked up, asking, "Did you two notice any differences?" Shisui smiled at Shishi and asked, "Shishi, what do you think?" Shishi pointed to the leftmost set of marks and smiled. Even though Minato-sensei was very careful, the time spent at each spot differed, so the marks left behind naturally vary, though the differences are extremely subtle. Kurama-sani couldn't help but reach out to feel the marks again, but still couldn't detect any difference, so he looked at Shisui. Shisui nodded and smiled, "Shishi, you have a talent for tracking. I relied on the inside of my Sharingan to sense a slight difference, but I couldn't be completely sure." Kurama-sani said, "Then let's choose the leftmost one." "Wouldn't that be too risky?" Shisui shook his head. "We should trust our instincts." Shishi agreed wholeheartedly, "I think so too." "Then the left it is." Kurama-sani took the lead and Shishi and Shisui immediately followed. 10 minutes later, they faced another choice, though this time there were only 2 sets of marks. After observing the marks, both Shishi and Shisui looked serious. It was difficult to judge. Minato had likely let his real body move ahead while his shadow clones lingered, making the time difference between the two sets of marks almost imperceptible. The two exchanged glances and then each followed one set of tracks for a short distance before returning. Shisui said, "The marks on the right lead toward a river." Shishi decisively said, "Then it's the right side." Karam S nodded in agreement. A river makes it easier to escape tracking, especially when it comes to scent and bloodstains. There were many dog-type summoning beasts in the ninja world, and like those used by the Inuzuka clan of Konoha. The three then pursued the trail on the right, which indeed led them to a river. They split up to search, each checking upstream, downstream, and the opposite bank. A moment later, they regrouped and began tracking down the river. Minato Namikaze had led them in circles. Shishi Hashida and his teammates had to constantly sift through various misleading tracks to find the most likely trail. At times, they encountered long stretches where no traces could be found, forcing them to widen their search radius. After navigating twists and turns for what felt like forever, the three of them, utterly exhausted, finally saw the familiar sight of Konoha, and standing on a tree branch with a smile on his face was Minato Namikaze. "Congratulations, you got it completely right," Minato said with a grin. Though their pace had been slow, it was enough to prove their exceptional abilities. In fact, Minato had a shadow clone following Shishi and the others the entire time, observing their performance closely. At this moment, the trio also broke into smiles. The night's tracking exercise had been incredibly rewarding for them. For Shishi Hashida, in particular, not only had he gained valuable insights from Shisui Uchiha and Karam S, but the tracking experience itself had allowed his innate talent for tracking to flourish, enhancing his sensitivity to traces. Realizing his potential, absorbing knowledge from his comrades, and accumulating experience, it was a win on all three fronts. Minato then announced, "All right, let's head back to the village. Get a good night's sleep, and we'll meet at the usual spot tomorrow." The four of them returned to the village and then went their separate ways. Once home, Shishi washed up, made himself some breakfast, and reviewed the mission and the previous night's tracking before finally drifting off to sleep with a contented smile. He slept until 2 p.m. After washing up, Shishi went out, had a bowl of Ichiraku ramen, and then headed to Konoha Hospital. Shishi. Seeing him, Non-Yakushi was pleasantly surprised. "Director." Shishi quickly walked over and explained, "I returned this morning and already had a nap." Non-Yakushi nodded gently. "Then come with me. Lady Tsunade is here today for a patient consultation." Shishi's eyes lit up, and he quickly nodded, following her. Tsunade, despite her hemophobia, was a rare sight in the hospital. Could hemophobia, which is psychological in nature, be treated with genjutsu? Shishi stayed at the hospital until 4:30 p.m., then headed to the place where he had trained with Kakashi and the others during the last break. "Hey!" He noticed a figure hanging from the cliffside. Kakashi. Come to think of it, this was the first time he'd seen Kakashi since graduation. A battle was a must. As soon as Kakashi descended from the cliff, Shishi immediately challenged him, "Kakashi, you haven't been slacking off, have you?" Kakashi, still as cool as ever, replied casually, "You'll find out soon enough." If it were Obito Uchiha, Kakashi would have made a snarky remark or two. But Shishi's discipline and effort, which even Kakashi couldn't match, meant their rivalry had to be settled with fists and feet. 10 minutes later, the two clashed, their fists and feet meeting in a collision that sent shockwaves through the air. In that instant of impact, both could feel that the other's speed and strength had increased. Kakashi knew that Shishi possessed exceptional insight and reaction time, along with an incredible memory of Kakashi's past combat habits. So he pushed himself to fight as fast as possible, moving at top speed. The sounds of their punches and kicks intensified as the battle raged on. They fought from the river's surface to the foot of the cliff, using the cliffside as solid ground, locked in a fierce, unyielding battle. When Shizuan, Gai, Kurane, Asuma, and the others arrived, this was the scene they witnessed. Chapter 29, Medical Ninja Tools. "It's Shishi and Kakashi!" Shizuan exclaimed in delight. She hadn't seen Shishi Hashida for several days. Might Guy was full of energy, there's no room for slacking off. "Today, I'll challenge myself to climb the cliff 500 times. If I can't do it, I'll have a match with Shishi." Sarutobi Asuma was secretly impressed, their speed is incredible. Being able to fight so fiercely while moving as if the cliff were flat ground showed how well both of them had mastered their chakra control. Their progress is amazing. Asuma began to consider the possibility of graduating early. Although he had his older brother and other clan members to guide him, and could continue to improve even without graduating, school was starting to feel a bit dull for him. Watching Shishi Hashira and Kakashi, he had the sense that both of them had advanced even faster after graduating. However, Asuma couldn't help but glance at Kurane Yui beside him. Compared to graduating, Kurane was more important. Atop the cliff, Shishi and Kakashi were panting heavily, drenched in sweat, and too exhausted to continue fighting. Another draw. However, considering that Kakashi had already expended some energy before the fight, even with a short rest, Shishi could tell that Kakashi still had the edge in stamina and energy. If it weren't for the boosts in focus and mental processing speed from his tags, he might not have even managed a draw. Kakashi's combat intelligence was impressive even at his young age, it was already beginning to show. But Shishi wasn't discouraged. The fact that he could now hold his own against Kakashi in Taijutsu was proof that his training hadn't been in vain, and that his tags were truly powerful. At the same time, Shishi felt an increasing urgency to improve his physical condition. He didn't expect to rival people like Jiraiya or Naruto, but at the very least, he couldn't afford to fall behind Kakashi. Shishi remembered that among Konoha's genin, Kakashi wasn't particularly notable in terms of stamina. He was slightly outclassed by someone like Asuma Sarutobi. In the ninja world, as battles grew more intense, physical stamina or chakra reserves became increasingly crucial, often forming an insurmountable barrier. Without enough chakra, even the most powerful techniques couldn't be unleashed. After descending from the cliff, Shishi greeted Shizune and the others. Just as he was about to grab a drink from his backpack, Shizune handed him a bottle. Shishi accepted it without hesitation. "Thanks." Shizune watched him as he drank, and then said, "Shishi, I have a few questions about the Memory Palace technique. Do you have some time to help me out?" "Of course." Shishi agreed instantly, and the two of them huddled together, with Shizune asking questions and Shishi answering them. Meanwhile, Asuma and Kurane teamed up to climb the cliff. Kakashi, maintaining his cool demeanor, was resting while his gaze fell on Guy, who was frog jumping with a large boulder. The afternoon training session passed by quickly, almost without notice. As evening approached, Shishi Hashira bid farewell to Shizune and the others and met up with Non-Yakushi. Together, they returned to the orphanage with an assortment of food. From now on, Shishi knew he'd be spending less and less time at the orphanage, and the number of people he knew there would dwindle. So whenever he had the chance, he made sure to visit. Even though he hadn't spent much time there, Non-Yakushi considered the orphanage her home, and so it became a home for Shishi as well. That night, Shishi and Non had a long conversation. He made a makeshift bed on the floor in her room, and the comforting scent unique to Non soon lulled him into a peaceful sleep. The next morning, after saying goodbye to Non, a refreshed Shishi went home to pack his backpack. On the way to meet up with Minato Namikaze and the others, he also purchased a set of surgical tools. Yes, surgical tools for a medical ninja. As a medical ninja, considering surgical tools as ninja tools seemed entirely reasonable to him. So Shishi decided he no longer needed to train with things like nunchaku or staffs. Surgical tools would be enough for him to achieve the status of a ninja tool expert. Plus, it would be a much faster way to reach his goal than practicing with other weapons. When Shishi met up with Minato and the others, the day's training began. For the next few days, the team had no missions, focusing entirely on various training exercises, traps, tracking, combat drills, and so on. During breaks, Shishi spent time practicing on small animals, rabbits, wild boars, chickens, fish, and more. This practice served two purposes: it helped him hone his medical ninjutsu and use of medical tools, while also allowing him to observe the animal's characteristics, laying the groundwork for his transformation master tag. Before he knew it, 4 days had passed, and April had arrived quietly. To Shishi's surprise, even soldier pills counted as a type of ninja tool. With the addition of senbon needles, short swords, and the surgical knives he'd been using extensively over the past few days, he was now only 2 tools away from mastering 10 types of ninja tools. On April 2nd, Konoha year 39, at 9 a.m., Shishi appeared before Minato and the others at Konoha's village gate with a new look. He wore black clothing with iron wrist and arm guards, similar to before, but his original jacket had been replaced with a black vest resembling Minato's green vest. Besides the color difference, Shishi's vest was customized with several small pockets. Noticing Minato and the others looking at him curiously, Shishi hooked a finger into one of the vest pockets, revealing a sharp surgical knife. Shishi, did you bring your surgical tools along? Kurama-san recognized the knife immediately. He'd seen Shishi dissect all those small animals with it over the past few days. Shishi smiled, of course. As a medical ninja, carrying medical tools is both reasonable and necessary, right? Kurama-san scratched the back of his head. Well, yeah, but aren't surgeries usually done with more than one person? Shishi sheathed the knife. Once I have enough chakra to use shadow clones, the tools will come in handy. Better to be prepared. He could already use shadow clones, though his chakra reserves didn't allow him to sustain them for long. At this point, Minato stepped in to stop the small talk. All right, let's get going. Our mission this time is to serve as one of the patrol squads on the western border of the Land of Fire. The mission will last for half a month, so be prepared. The three of them responded in unison, understood. The four of them set off immediately, heading west after leaving the village. By evening, they had reached the border between the Land of Fire and the Land of Rain, taking over from another squad to become one of the patrol units. That night, they began their monotonous patrol duties. Konoha had stationed far more patrol squads on the border with the Land of Rain than on the Land of River's border, 5 squads in total, patrolling in a staggered, overlapping pattern. This heavy presence was due to the chaos that had gripped the Land of Rain since the end of the Second Shinobi World War. Rogue ninjas, bandits, and spies or ninjas from other villages were common in the area. The reason for this was twofold. The Land of Rain had been one of the major battlefields of the Second Shinobi World War, and it was also surrounded by the Land of Fire, the Land of Wind, and the Land of Earth. As a result, it had become a hotspot for conflict among the 3 major ninja villages. Additionally, the instability in the Land of Rain was exacerbated by Hanzo's waning ambition and the retreat of his forces. Chapter 30, Ninja Tool Expert Tag Unlocked. The handover of duties, familiarizing themselves with the patrol route, and understanding the various traps and warning devices set up by the previous team kept them busy until around 9 p.m. After everything was in order, Minato Namikaze issued his command. The first half of the night, Shisui and I will patrol together. Shishi and Sani, you two will take the second half. Get some rest while you can. Understood. After only half an hour of rest, Minato Namikaze and Shisui Uchiha began their patrol. Part of their duties included checking the traps and other arrangements to ensure they hadn't been damaged by wild animals or anything else that could compromise their effectiveness in battle. Success lies in the details. However, the patrol route assigned to Shishi Hashida's team was actually at the last stage of a tiered defense layout. There were 3 other defensive lines ahead of them. But as the team leader, Minato Namikaze remained vigilant, not allowing any room for complacency. At 1 a.m., Shishi Hashida and Kurama-san took over the night watch from Minato Namikaze and Shisui Uchiha, keeping watch until 5 a.m. Before finishing their shift, Shishi managed to catch a wild rabbit and 2 fish, cleaning them with his medical tools. Minato and the others had grown accustomed to this and showed no discomfort. After breakfast, Shishi and Kurama-san rested while they could. At 9 a.m., the squad moved out together. They had to dismantle some of the traps and setups left by the previous team and then reconfigure everything according to their own preferences and habits. For Shishi, this was another invaluable lesson. Thus, the trap expert tag was triggered. Unfortunately, Shishi wasn't particularly interested in this tag for the time being. Even though there were still conflicts between the ninja villages during peacetime, these clashes typically took place outside their respective countries. As a result, the borders of the Land of Fire were relatively peaceful. The main purpose of a patrol squad setup was to provide early warnings of large-scale invasions. However, if individuals were sneaking in covertly, it was almost impossible to stop them. The Land of Fire's borders were simply too long. Before they knew it, 12 days of monotonous patrol duties had passed. On this particular day, Shishi was in an exceptionally good mood. After nearly half a month of hard work and hunting, he finally met the conditions to unlock the Ninja Tool Expert tag. But Shishi didn't rush to unlock it immediately. He waited until their patrol duties were done for the day and they had eaten and rested. Only then did he focus on the tag tree in his mind. Ninja Tool Expert unlocked. With a single thought, the previously grayed out tag was enveloped in a green glow. Suddenly, Shishi felt a surge of energy coursing through his entire body, leaving him tingling all over as his consciousness seemed to elevate. About 10 minutes later, the strange sensation faded away. In the darkness, Shishi opened his eyes, which were now incredibly sharp. He glanced around and noticed an insect flying in the moonlight. Instinctively, Shishi tried to focus on the insect more clearly. To his surprise, the insect's rapidly flapping wings appeared to slow down. Though there was still some blurring, he could almost distinguish each individual flap, something he couldn't do before. Prior to this, Shishi's thought processing speed had been enhanced by a factor of 2. The speed at which his brain processed various information and thoughts had indeed increased. This enhancement granted him a type of dynamic vision similar to the Sharingan, allowing him to process visual information faster and react more quickly. However, it was far from the level he's experiencing now, where he could almost discern each flap of a fast-moving insect's wings. Tag: Ninja Tool Expert. Condition to obtain: proficient use of at least 10 different ninja tools. Effects: 100% increase in ninja tool proficiency, 100% increase in physical attributes, and 100% increase in neural response speed. While Shishi hadn't yet experienced the benefits of improved ninja tool proficiency or enhanced physical attributes, the 100% increase in neural response speed was something he could immediately feel. If, before acquiring the scholar tag, his overall neural response speed including his thought processing speed was at a baseline of 1, then with the scholar tag's 100% boost to mental processing speed, Shishi's brain's neural response speed became 2, while the rest of his body remained at 1. For instance, the process of his eyes transmitting images to his brain was now twice as fast. After spending considerable time training with Shisui Uchiha, he knew that his dynamic vision still couldn't quite match Shisui's single Tomo Sharingan, but the gap had narrowed. Now, with the Ninja Tool Expert tag, his neural response speed had doubled again. This meant Shishi's brain now processed information at a speed of 4, while his other neural responses were at 2. Not only did his brain process information faster, but the speed at which his eyes transmitted visual data to his brain had also doubled. The result was remarkable. This level of perception definitely surpasses that of a single Tomo Sharingan. Shishi was thrilled. But just doubling the speed at which my visual nerves transmit information shouldn't have produced such a significant effect. The key is my brain's processing speed. It was already doubled before, and now it's doubled again. This is incredible. The concept of dynamic vision not only involves the speed of neural signal transmission but also the speed and efficiency with which the brain interprets the images seen by the eyes. Unless we're talking about insects with multiple compound eyes, which are like multiple cameras capturing separate images. He had dissected plenty of insects before. Before obtaining the scholar tag, my neural response speed was definitely far inferior to Minato-sensei's. But with the scholar tag, even if my brain processing speed was still a bit slower, the gap wasn't significant. And now, the difference should be negligible. Although this was just a hypothesis, Shishi was fairly confident. Previously, he had consulted Minato about neural response speed. Minato's reaction time was fast, but even he couldn't see the wings of a fly flapping at high speed. In this regard, even 3 Tomo Sharingan had an edge. But Minato's strengths never lay in visual acuity. His high neural response speed, strong perception abilities, immense chakra reserves, and most importantly, his space-time ninjutsu talents all combined to make Minato's Flying Thunder God technique even more advanced than its creator, the second Hokage Tobirama Senju. Of course, Minato stood on Tobirama's shoulders, which made it relatively easier for him, but it also highlighted Minato's terrifying talent. Unfortunately, since joining Minato's team, Shishi had only seen him in action once and it was over in a single move. As for sparring with Minato, it was too easy for him, making it impossible to gauge Minato's true strength. I need to quickly adapt to my enhanced neural response speed. The improvement in physical attributes probably requires some exploration on my part as well. Closing his eyes slowly, Shishi began planning to intensify his training once they returned to Konoha. Despite the physical enhancement, he didn't feel an abrupt surge in strength, indicating that it might require training to fully unlock. But that was to be expected. Content and at ease, Shishi soon drifted off to sleep. Shishi. Shishi suddenly woke up. It was Shisui Uchiha. There's an emergency mission. Shisui explained, an Anbu ninja just arrived from the land of rain, and Minato-sensei had to return to the village briefly. Shishi quickly got up, noticing Minato resting with his eyes closed under a nearby tree. He then spotted another person, not dressed as a ninja, resting against another tree. After Shisui woke up Kurama-sani, Shishi asked, "Shisui, what's the mission? Shisui replied, we need to assist an intelligence officer who has critical information. The situation in the Land of Rain is complicated, and their escape route has been cut off. Chapter 31, Sudden Incident. Listening to Uchiha Shisui, both Shishi Hashira and Karam S turned their attention to the Anbu ninja. He had returned to report, but without the intel. This suggested that something went wrong either during or just before the rendezvous. The Anbu ninja seemed to be around the same age as Minato, and Shishi felt a sense of familiarity with him. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, Shisui swallowed a military ration pill and said, rest up for a bit longer. A sudden mission like this is bound to be challenging. Shishi and Sani nodded in agreement, then sat down and each took a military ration pill. About half an hour later, Minato opened his eyes and stood up, followed by the Anbu ninja. Shishi, are you all ready? Minato asked Shishi and the others. Shishi and Sani both nodded, no problem at all, sensei. Minato nodded, all right then, let's move out. Swish, swish, swish. The three of them followed closely behind Minato, leaping through the forest and carefully avoiding the traps they had previously set. The Anbu ninja trailed behind them. After crossing a large forest, the Land of Rain appeared before them, and the group came to a halt. Fortunately, it wasn't raining. Shishi silently sighed in relief, while Minato spoke up, the mission is to rendezvous with an intelligence officer. The opposition consists of a large number of rogue ninjas from the Land of Rain, who can also be considered bounty hunters. In addition to them, there are two more elite forces. As for their identities, Minato paused before continuing, they are suspected to be Sunanin and Aim Nin. Shishi shivered instinctively and blurted out, is this related to the last mission? Minato replied, it's uncertain at this time. Once we enter the Land of Rain, stay on high alert. As soon as we secure the intelligence officer, Shisui, Shishi, and Sani, the three of you will prioritize escorting him back to the Land of Fire. The border patrol squad will meet you. If the mission can't be completed, then initiate Plan B, bring back the intel. Shishi and the others instantly felt a chill in their hearts. They understood very well what that meant. If it came to that, any one of them might be the one to bring back the intel. However, Minato suddenly smiled, but don't worry too much. I doubt it'll come to that. The atmosphere lightened significantly, and the four of them resumed their journey, entering the Land of Rain. Shishi glanced back at the Anbu ninja, whom Minato hadn't introduced. Seeing him unarmed, Shishi slowed his pace slightly and handed over a kunai. The Anbu ninja was momentarily surprised, then accepted it with a smile, thank you. I'm Sarutobi Shinnishuk, the Hokage's son. Shishi was taken aback, then responded, I'm Hashida Shishi. They didn't speak further, focusing instead on the mission. Soon, Shinnishuk surged ahead, leading the group. In the dark of night, they crossed a barren expanse, climbed over two mountains, and then Shinnishuk stopped, pointing to a town with only a few scattered lights in the distance. The intelligence officer is hiding in there, using the complex sewer system for cover. But his current situation is unclear. However, he will have left clues to help us find him. Upon hearing this, Minato immediately said, in that case, Shisui, Shishi, Sani, you stay here to provide support. Shinnishuk, let's infiltrate and extract the intelligence officer. Shinnishuk nodded in agreement without hesitation. As for Shishi Hashida and the other two, they had no choice but to follow orders. After making the decision, Minato and Shinnishuk immediately set off, quickly disappearing from the sight of the three. After retracting his gaze, Uchiha Shisui said, Sani, Shishi, you two rest up. I'll keep watch. Got it. Shishi and Kurama Sani nodded in agreement, sitting down cross-legged to rest and recover their strength. At a time like this, there was no need for politeness. Having one person on watch while the other two rested to maintain optimal condition was the best choice. Time passed slowly, and an hour went by without any disturbances. Shishi finished his rest and took over the watch from Shisui. Before they knew it, dawn had arrived. Kurama Sani was beginning to get restless. Shisui, Shishi. Shisui calmly replied, don't worry, Sani. Don't forget the special kunai that Minato-sensei gave me last time. Hearing this, Sani nodded repeatedly, taking a deep breath to calm himself. He then turned to Shishi with a wry smile, Shishi, your mental resilience is really impressive. Just as Shishi was about to respond, Minato suddenly appeared with a person who was battered and covered in wounds. "Sensei!" All three of them were pleasantly surprised. Minato immediately instructed, "Shishi, tend to his wounds. Then you three take him back to the land of fire." After giving the order, Minato vanished again. Shishi quickly moved to support the wounded intelligence officer that Minato had rescued, checking his injuries. There were many wounds, but fortunately, most of them were not deep. Shishi quickly had Sani help bandage the minor wounds with medical bandages, while he focused on the deeper ones, mainly stopping the bleeding and providing emergency treatment. "Thank you. My name is Koichi Hotada," the intelligence officer said weakly. Shishi smiled and handed Koichi a military ration pill along with his own sugared water. This was his habit whenever he went on a mission, he always brought salt and sugar. With a water flask, it was easy to make salt water or sugared water to quickly replenish his body's needs. After about 10 minutes, Koichi Hotada stood up and said, "I'm ready." Shisui immediately commanded, "Let's go." He took the lead, with Koichi close behind, and Shishi and Sani followed on either side. At that moment, Shishi entered a state of 100% focus. Up front, Shisui had also activated his Sharingan. The four of them moved swiftly through the mountains and forests, quickly crossing over a large mountain. Suddenly, Shisui warned, "Be careful, enemies are approaching." Shishi scanned the sides, his gaze sweeping over the trees. The previously fast-moving scenery seemed to slow down, and he was able to spot the figures swiftly moving through the forest. He immediately alerted the group, "There are a lot of them. We're surrounded." Enemies were closing in from behind and on both sides. It was likely these enemies had been lying in ambush in the forest for some time. "Sani, take Hotada-senpai and go ahead. Shishi and I will hold them off." Shisui's voice had barely faded when the sound of clashing metal rang out. He had already engaged two enemies who were blocking their path. "Understood." Sani quickly formed a hand seal, casting a genjutsu to assist Shisui in taking down his first opponent. Without looking back, Sani then led Koichi Hotada away from the battlefield, breaking through the enemy lines. The enemies on the flanks quickly swarmed after them, ignoring Shishi. Chapter 32, The First Real Battle. Shishi Hashida didn't bother with the enemies on either side. Instead, he dashed forward to join forces with Uchiha Shisui, swiftly slashing the throat of the enemy who was fighting Shisui. The two of them then unleashed their chakra without hesitation, propelling themselves forward with the body flicker technique to its maximum potential. This was Shisui's specialty, and his speed was faster than Shishi's. Within seconds, he caught up with two enemies, and the sounds of clashing metal rang out through the forest. Shishi was a bit slower, and when he intercepted two enemies, he wielded a kunao in his left hand, the Totsuka chakra blade in his right, and had a senbon clutched between his teeth. "Brat, get lost! You're in the way! Die!" The enemies, dressed as rogue ninjas, snarled with twisted expressions, brandishing their swords as they charged at Shishi. Shishi also surged forward, and in his eyes, the movements of the two enemies seemed to slow down. Clang! Squelch! Ah, my eyes! Three sounds rang out almost simultaneously. Shishi dodged one attack, blocked another with his kunao, and at the same time, his Totsuka blade slashed open one enemy's throat while the senbon he spat out pierced the eye of the other. With a quick follow-up strike, Shishi turned and continued his pursuit. At the same time, he swallowed another military ration pill and grabbed another senbon to hold between his teeth. For most people, consuming a solider pill during battle wouldn't have much effect. But Shishi had the strong and sturdy tag, which doubled his body's recovery ability, giving him an astonishingly fast digestion rate. By sparing no effort with his stamina and chakra, Shishi soon caught sight of the enemy ahead. Meanwhile, the group ahead, led by Shind Masaru, was surprised. A kid, a Konoha genin, had actually caught up. Though they weren't elite ninja from a major village, but rather part of one of the many small ninja organizations in the Land of Rain, they were still quite experienced. Judging by Shishi's age, he likely just graduated. A Konoha prodigy? The thought flashed through Shind Masaru's mind before he ordered, "Leave two to hold off the kid. The rest of you, speed up." "Yes, sir." The five ninja at the rear followed the order. Two of them immediately halted, turning to face Shishi. Whoosh! 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 Shuriken and kunao sliced through the air. Shishi easily deflected them, and just as he was about to engage in close combat, he spat out the senbon from his mouth. "Don't underestimate me, kid." The bearded enemy sneered, tilting his head to dodge the senbon. But then, Shishi's mouth suddenly shot out a stream of fire. Fire release, flame bullet. At such close range, and with no warning signs, Shishi Hashira had no free hands to form hand signs, making it impossible to anticipate a jutsu. The bearded enemy barely had time to react before a flame bullet blasted into his face, sending him flying without even a chance to scream. The other enemy was initially shocked, then delighted. Seizing the opportunity, he lunged forward, swinging his blade at Shishi. He believed that this swift strike, honed over 10 years, was something the boy couldn't possibly dodge. However, in Shishi's eyes, the attack seemed slow. He ducked, using his arms to support himself on the ground, and kicked out with both legs, striking the enemy squarely in the abdomen and sending him flying. Shishi then flipped back onto his feet, already hurling the kunao in his left hand. This enemy was tough, though, despite the pain, he managed to swing his sword and deflect the kunao. As he hit the ground, he rolled several times before springing back up. But at that moment, Shishi was upon him. His small frame plunged into the enemy's chest, stabbing rapidly with the Totsuka blade in his hand, slicing upward to disembowel him. The enemy fell to the ground, and Shishi used his body to propel himself forward, not stopping for a moment to continue his pursuit. The enemy's blood was warm, its metallic scent filling the air. Shishi didn't bother wiping the blood splattered on his face. He grabbed a new senbon to hold between his teeth and readied another kunao in his left hand. At that moment, Uchiha Shisui caught up and quickly passed Shishi. By the time Shishi reached them, Shisui had already intercepted Shind Masaru and his 4 men, but he was being pushed back under their combined assault, with 2 wounds already on his body. Shishi immediately threw the kunao in his hand, aiming directly at Shind Masaru, the strongest of the group. Then, with a quick movement, he pulled 3 shuriken from his pouch and threw them while spitting out a stream of flames that ignited the shuriken. Fire release, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Shind Masaru easily dodged Shishi's kunao, unaffected as he continued his attack on Shisui. However, the other 3 enemies had to dodge Shishi's Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Though Shishi wasn't skilled in flashy ninja tool techniques, his talent in using them had doubled, and with his dynamic vision, his accuracy had greatly improved. Even though the attacks ultimately missed, Shisui was freed from the encirclement. Seeing this, Shind Masaru immediately retreated. Shishi joined Shisui, standing side by side as they caught their breath. "Are you okay?" he asked. Shisui shook his head. "Just minor injuries." Shind Masaru's gaze fell on Shishi, thinking to himself, "It looks like this brat is running low on stamina. I'll take him out first." "No, I'll take both of these brats out." Whoosh! Shind Masaru flicked a shuriken at Shishi and shouted, "Attack!" The 3 enemies charged forward. Shind Masaru saw Shisui forming hand signs and immediately realized he was preparing to release a fire release jutsu. He quickly planted his sword into the ground and formed hand signs as well. Water release, water formation wall. A water barrier appeared in front of the 3 advancing ninjas. However, Shisui seemed to hesitate for a moment, and the great fireball technique didn't come out. Cunning brat! Realizing he had been tricked into wasting a jutsu, Shind Masaru was furious. But just as he was about to drop the water barrier, Shishi quickly threw 3 ninja tools in succession. The first was a shuriken, the second a hand grenade, and the third a kunao. The 3 projectiles were lined up almost perfectly, so the shuriken and the hand grenade passed through the water barrier without losing much speed. "Smart brat, but this trick won't work on me." Shind Masaru sneered internally. The kid probably thought that forcing him to drop the water release would allow the Uchiha brat to use his fire release. But that was underestimating him. Maintaining the water release, Shind Masaru kicked the sword in front of him. The sword flew up, accurately hitting the kunao and deflecting it. The shuriken, having lost momentum after passing through the water, fell to the ground before reaching him. Across from him, a smile crept onto Shishi's face. Retreat! Both Shishi and Shisui swiftly hid behind a tree. The next moment, the hand grenade exploded mid-air, flames erupting as countless tiny iron beads shot out in all directions. The closest, Shind Masaru, had his head blown apart, and the water barrier collapsed instantly. The other 3 enemies, still unaware of what had happened, were pierced by the steel balls from behind. Chapter 33, the true profession of the third Kazekage. Stepping out from behind the tree, Uchiha Shisui looked at the bodies scattered on the ground in shock. It was his first time witnessing the power of a hand grenade. Shishi Hashida was quite satisfied with the grenade's debut, smiling as he said, "Just a small design, Shisui, you'll understand more about it in the future." Uchiha Shisui immediately understood and nodded without asking further questions. As he walked forward, Shishi opened his mouth and unleashed a great fireball, engulfing and incinerating all the bodies. Given the amount of chakra he had, he couldn't melt the steel balls, but it was enough to destroy the evidence on the battlefield, ensuring no one could uncover the mystery behind the hand grenade. After finishing this, Shishi and Uchiha Shisui turned and pursued Kurama-sani. 10 minutes later, Shishi and Shisui reunited with Kurama-sani and his companion, then retraced their steps, entering the Land of Fire, where they were met by a squad of ANBU operatives. Unlike Sarutobi Shinoshuke's team from before, these ANBU members all wore animal masks. Unless you were familiar with them, it was hard to identify who they were. These ANBU operatives didn't engage in any conversation with Shishi and his group, instead, they spread out around them, ensuring their protection. While Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-sani rested, Shishi popped another soldier pill and continued treating Koichi Hatada's injuries. His proficiency in the mystical palm technique wasn't particularly high, so it took more time for him to heal the deep wounds on Koichi Hatada's body, which also meant consuming more chakra. As for Minato Namikaze and Sarutobi Shinoshuke, Shishi wasn't sure of Shinoshuke's exact strength, but he trusted Minato and his Flying Thunder God technique. Time passed slowly. An hour later, the ANBU operatives suddenly reacted, with two of them heading west. Shishi and Shisui exchanged glances, both showing signs of happiness. Sure enough, not long after, Minato Namikaze appeared within their sight. "Sensei!" All three of them hurriedly approached. Minato smiled and said, "You all did an excellent job on this mission." Sarutobi Shinoshuke, having completed his handover with the ANBU squad, also came over and said to Shishi, "Shishi, I'm sorry, I couldn't retrieve your kunao." Shishi quickly responded with a well-rehearsed line, "Ninja tools are just consumables, but comrades are not." This statement made everyone turn their heads in surprise. As Minato and the others silently pondered his words, Kurama-sani enthusiastically exclaimed, "Shishi, that was spot on." Sarutobi Shinoshuke also nodded in approval, genuinely believing that his father hadn't misjudged Shishi. Minato patted Shishi on the shoulder, smiling as he said, "You've all done well. Rest up, and then we'll head back to Konoha." The three of them nodded in agreement. They definitely needed the rest. However, the ANBU squad, having completed the handover with Sarutobi Shinoshuke, was the first to set off, taking Koichi Hatada back to Konoha. While resting in the woods, Kurama-sani couldn't resist asking, "Sensei, was it Sand Shinobi?" Minato glanced at Sarutobi Shinoshuke before nodding. "Yes, it was Sand Shinobi. It's related to our previous mission. There are signs that Sand Shinobi and Hanzo might be joining forces, likely due to their interest in the Land of Rivers." Uchiha Shisui quickly asked, "Sensei, could Sand Shinobi be planning to ally with Hanzo to compete with us for the Land of Rivers? If they do, what's in it for Sand Shinobi? Even if they take over the Land of Rivers with Hanzo, they'd have to share the benefits." Minato nodded. "You're right, Shisui, but Sand Shinobi has the upper hand against Hanzo, while they're at a disadvantage against us, Konoha. Additionally, the Land of Rivers hasn't aligned itself with Konoha." "What?" Both Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-sani were stunned, unable to comprehend this. After all, the evidence from their last mission was clear. How could the Daimyo of the Land of Rivers ignore Sand Shinobi's atrocities? Shishi, however, pondered, "Sensei, could this be more than just a struggle for missions in the Land of Rivers?" Sarutobi Shinoshuke was surprised, but Minato smiled. "You really are something, Shishi." Moreover, Shishi looked at Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-sani. To the Daimyo of the Land of Rivers, that village might not be important at all. Sandwiched between great nations, the best strategy is to remain neutral, reaping benefits from all sides rather than fully siding with one unless that side possesses absolute power. Despite saying this, Shishi couldn't help but suspect that Danzo might be involved in this. It wasn't that he wanted to slander Danzo, but the guy was an extremist. Hiruzen Sarutobi often delegated dirty and tough tasks to Danzo, giving him the opportunity to amass his own power and ambitions. Would Danzo simply present evidence to the Daimyo of the Land of Rivers and gently persuade them to abandon Sand Shinobi? Now, Shishi was more inclined to believe that Danzo would use a tough stance to pressure the Land of Rivers. In fact, if he were to be more cynical, could Danzo even be trying to stir up conflict on purpose? Upon hearing Shishi Hashida's words, Uchiha Shisui fell into deep thought, while Kurama-sani remained puzzled. Politics, he didn't understand it. T/N, me too bro. Shishi Hashida didn't fully grasp it either, but he knew a little. After resting for about 2 hours, Shishi and his group of 5 set out for Konoha, arriving late at night. After completing their mission and reporting to the Hokage at the tower, Minato Namikaze announced a 3-day vacation. Once they were dismissed, Shishi headed home, enjoyed a long bath, and then went out for a big meal. As he exited the restaurant, he happened to spot Tenka in a kimono. Her graceful figure was a sight to behold, so he immediately approached her. "Sister Tenka." Tenka turned around, surprised and delighted to see Shishi. "Shishi, didn't you say it would take half a month?" Shishi smiled, the mission ended earlier than expected. He glanced up and down at Tenka's curvaceous figure and teased, "You look so beautiful, Sister Tenka. Are you going on a date?" Tenka's face flushed slightly, and she huffed, "Do I look like someone who needs to go on a date?" Then she added, "I'm out with my sister, she's about to get engaged." Sister? Engaged? This was the first time Shishi learned that Tenka had a sister. He quickly smiled and offered his congratulations. Tenka wrapped her arm around Shishi's shoulder and said, "If you're in the village, you must come. You'll be a guest of honor for our family." Shishi agreed immediately, he had no objections to getting closer to Tenka's family. Back home, Shishi tossed his bags onto the floor and flopped onto the sofa. Sure enough, no matter where you are, shopping with women is the most exhausting thing. After spending an hour shopping with Tenka, he felt more tired than he did during a mission. But Tenka also bought him a bunch of stuffed clothes, shoes, a Megatama pendant, and so on. After resting for a while, Shishi sorted through the gifts from Tenka and then went to sleep. He planned to go to bed early today since tomorrow would mark the beginning of 3 days of intensive training. As for taking a vacation, that was out of the question. However, while Shishi was peacefully asleep, the lights in the Hokage's office were still burning brightly. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo, Koharu Udadan, and Homura Mitokado were gathered there. "Danzo, you shouldn't have pressured the Land of Rivers like that, they have a daimyo after all," Homura Mitokado complained. Danzo replied calmly, "But the truth is, our methods have been too soft. The third Kazekage has helped the Land of Rivers discover iron ore, so it's inevitable that they'll side with the Sand Shinobi. Unless we make the daimyo of the Land of Rivers understand that without Konoha, they won't be able to mine that iron ore peacefully. You should know, the Land of Rain is currently filled with numerous ninja organizations. If the Sand Shinobi and Hanzo can hire them to fight against us, then it's only natural for these ninja organizations to enter the Land of Rivers. So, resolving this matter completely is not difficult." Koharu Udadan agreed, "Danzo has a point. Now is not the time to discuss who's at fault." She turned to Hiruzen Sarutobi. "Hiruzen, how do you plan to handle this?" Hiruzen Sarutobi exhaled a puff of smoke and said in a low voice, "We cannot afford to lose the missions from the Land of Rivers. Moreover, we must prevent Hanzo and the Sand Shinobi from joining forces. Danzo, I'll leave this matter to the Root Division." Though he felt a tinge of disappointment, Danzo nodded in agreement. Hiruzen Sarutobi continued, "As for the cooperation between the Land of Rivers and the Sand Shinobi, I'll have Sakumo investigate it thoroughly." Chapter 34, Victory. April 16, Konoha Year 39. Shishi Hashida woke up early. After washing up and putting on his black training uniform, he jogged out the door. First up, a 10-kilometer run around the village. With a light step, Shishi disappeared into the morning light. 10 minutes later, a familiar voice reached his ears. It was Might Guy. Sure enough, Shishi soon saw Guy approaching from around a corner, moving towards him on his hands. Guy lifted his head and spotted Shishi as well, flipping upright with a joyful shout, "Shishi, you're back." Shishi stopped in his tracks and smiled, "Yeah, I returned to the village last night." "So, Guy, how about a little competition?" Guy, eager as ever, immediately agreed, "That's exactly what I was going to suggest. If I don't win, as punishment, I'll do another lap around the village this afternoon on frog jumps." Shishi added, and if I don't win, I'll have a Taijutsu match with Kakashi as my punishment. Then let's get started. With passion surging through him, Guy flipped back into his handstand, and Shishi quickly followed suit. The two of them moved in sync, racing on their hands. They ran around the village, their sweat glistening in the morning light, creating a striking scene. 20 minutes later, they both returned to the starting point, leaning against the wooden fence and panting heavily. Shishi had lost. But he clearly felt that his stamina had significantly improved. The double physical enhancement was really paying off. As he dug deeper into its benefits, he realized that his chakra might not double, but increasing it by 2/3 wouldn't be out of reach. While resting, Shishi chatted casually with Guy. 10 minutes later, Guy left for academy, and Shishi headed home for breakfast. After breakfast, he went to his usual training spot to continue his regimen. He walked across the river while carrying a large rock. He climbed the cliff while holding that same large rock. This was both a physical training exercise and a chakra control exercise. After his morning training, Shishi returned to the village's shopping district for a big meal. He needed a lot of energy. At 2 p.m., when he returned to his training spot, he saw Kakashi hanging from the cliff with one hand. A smile immediately spread across Shishi's face. The Taijutsu Expert tag would require Kakashi. So, when Kakashi climbed to the top of the cliff, he was greeted by Shishi's smiling invitation, "Kakashi, how about a Taijutsu match? Let's see if you've been slacking off in your training." Kakashi responded with a hint of reluctance, "I'd be happy to, but at least let me rest first, okay?" "Of course." Shishi smiled and tossed a bottle of lightly salted water from his bag to Kakashi. Kakashi accepted it without hesitation, taking large gulps. The two sat side by side on the edge of the cliff, and Shishi casually asked, "Learned any new jutsu recently?" Kakashi replied, "Lightning release chakra nature transformation." Shishi was slightly surprised. "So, you've already completed your earth release nature transformation training?" Kakashi nodded casually, "Yet." Shishi gave him a thumbs up. Kakashi was naturally gifted with two chakra natures, earth and lightning release. This meant that when training in earth and lightning release jutsu, he didn't need to go through the specific chakra nature transformation training to use the corresponding jutsu. For example, Kakashi had mastered the earth release, earth-style wall jutsu early on and had used it many times in the practical classes at the Ninja Academy. However, the same jutsu would have different power levels depending on the person using it. The two main factors that influenced this were chakra amount and chakra nature transformation. For instance, the wind release, Rasen Shuriken, is a prime example of the extreme combination of wind chakra nature transformation and shape transformation. This is also why Shishi hadn't specifically trained in fire release chakra nature transformation but was still able to train in fire release jutsu. Because he was naturally gifted with fire release. Of course, after training in 5 fire release jutsu, Shishi had actually completed his fire release chakra nature transformation training in the process. However, he hadn't started on wind release yet. After resting for half an hour, Shishi Hashida and Kakashi squared off, ready to begin their Taijutsu duel. Dust flew and sweat splattered as the two clashed. They fought from the top of the cliff to the ground, and then moved to the river's surface. The more they fought, the more astonished Kakashi became. He was being completely overpowered. Though Kakashi primarily focused on ninjutsu, he had never neglected his taijutsu training. He was confident that he had made considerable progress recently, especially with Guy, that overly enthusiastic Guy, pushing him, and Shishi, this overly disciplined Guy, as his rival. It's his reaction speed. Shishi's reaction speed has increased again. Kakashi quickly realized the key difference. He intensified the weight of his strikes and increased the frequency of his attacks. But Shishi countered everything with relative ease. 10 minutes later, Kakashi collapsed onto the grass, utterly exhausted. He had no strength left, not a drop. Meanwhile, though Shishi was also drenched in sweat and breathing heavily, he remained standing. Victory! This was his first time winning a Taijutsu duel against Kakashi, and it marked a significant step forward toward unlocking the Taijutsu Expert tag. In the evening, after a long day, Shishi relaxed in his bath, soaking in the warm water with his eyes closed as he pondered his next training plan. He had already unlocked the Ninja Tools Expert tag, but the Taijutsu Expert tag required winning 50 Taijutsu duels against Kakashi. Today was just the first victory, so there was still a long way to go. Moreover, after today, Kakashi would likely train even harder, and Shishi couldn't afford to slack off either. So, which direction should he focus on next? Which tag should he aim to unlock? Medical Expert? Wind Release Expert? Clone Expert? Body Flicker Expert? Shishi's eyes roamed over the grey, unactivated tags on his tag tree. For most of the ninjutsu-related tags, the activation conditions were tied to the number of jutsu learned. If Shishi had come from a ninja clan, he would have had more access to ninjutsu resources. His previous fire release techniques too came from his father, one he learned from Uchiha Obito, and the remaining two were from Tenka. As for the clone jutsu, Shishi currently knew the basic clone technique and the shadow clone technique. He still needed to learn 3 more clone techniques. He naturally possessed fire and wind release, which meant he would need to develop another chakra nature transformation to train in the corresponding clone techniques. The situation with the body flicker technique was similar. Ninjutsu resources. Shishi sighed. In that case, I'll focus on medical expert first, and then wind release expert. Shishi had made up his mind. The resources for medical ninjutsu were available through non-yakushi, while the resources for wind release ninjutsu could be obtained from his sensei, Minato Namikaze. Besides, his role in the team was that of a medical ninja. He couldn't let that character setting fall apart. With a splash, Shishi finished his bath, dressed, and headed out to the orphanage. Tonight, he planned to stay with Director Non-Yakushi and study medical ninjutsu. Chapter 35, Swordsmanship Expert. The 3-day vacation flew by in the blink of an eye. April 19th, Konoha Year 39. Shishi Hashida and Uchiha Shisui met up at their usual spot. After waiting for a moment, Minato Namikaze appeared. Shishi. Minato called out as he handed over a scroll. Minato-sensei, this is... Shishi reached out and took the scroll. Minato smiled and said, this is a special request I made to the 3rd Hokage, Konoha's swordsmanship style. I've noticed that you've become proficient in using short swords, so I thought this would be perfect for you. Shishi was immediately overjoyed and quickly bowed. Thank you, Minato-sensei. Minato laughed and said, I haven't trained in swordsmanship specifically, so I can't guide you in the details of your practice. However, the Uchiha clan's swordsmanship is also quite formidable within Konoha's style, so Shisui will be an excellent sparring partner for you. Uchiha Shisui smiled right away, if you need any help, Shishi, just let me know. Shishi thanked them both repeatedly. He certainly wouldn't be shy about asking for help. After giving away the scroll, Minato announced, this mission will take us to the Daimyo's residence. It should take about 7 days, so make your preparations and meet at the village gate in half an hour. Understood. The 3 of them immediately dispersed. Returning home, Shishi began packing his things while also checking the tags in his mind's tag tree. On the tag tree, the swordsmanship expert tag had appeared. Despite becoming proficient with the short sword earlier, it hadn't triggered until now. Tag, Swordsmanship Expert. Condition to obtain, master the Konoha swordsmanship style assigned by Minato Namikaze and win a swordsmanship duel against Kakashi Hotaki. Effect, swordsmanship talent increased by 100%, and the designated weapon's quality improved by 100%. Looking at the unlock conditions, Shishi couldn't help but laugh wryly. Kakashi again. Fortunately, though it's a swordsmanship duel, it won't be purely about swordsmanship. Shishi knew that if it were purely about swordsmanship, he wouldn't have much confidence in beating Kakashi. After all, Kakashi had been trained by Sakumo Hotaki and possessed extraordinary natural talent. As for why it was called swordsmanship when it involved a sword, in the ninja world, the term sword encompasses swords and is often referred to as true sword. Therefore, whether it's a knife or a sword, it's generally referred to as swordsmanship. The Konoha swordsmanship style is quite comprehensive and serves as an umbrella term for various techniques. For instance, the Uchiha clan's swordsmanship, the Hotaki style, and even the Flying Thunder God Slash of the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju, are all included. Additionally, techniques like the dance of the crescent moon, moon shadow, and leaf style willow are all highly representative. After placing the scroll into his backpack, Shishi headed out to the village gate, where he met up with Minato and the others before setting off towards the Daimyo's residence. This mission allowed plenty of time, so they didn't travel at a fast pace. Along the way, Minato briefed the team on their mission. This time, we're going at the invitation of the Daimyo. The Daimyo? Kurama-san's eyes widened with excitement. Does that mean the Daimyo has heard of us? Minato smiled, no, the daimyo wants to form his own ninja guard and has already recruited a few people. He requested that the village send some ninja to exchange ideas with them, so the third Hokage assigned this mission to us. Kurama-sani was a bit disappointed but then asked with some confusion, but isn't Konoha the ninja village of the land of fire? Why would the daimyo need to form his own ninja guard when he could just have the village send people? This was also something Uchiha Shisui was curious about, so he looked toward Minato. Minato, however, turned to Shishi. Shishi, what do you think? Shishi pretended to think for a moment before responding, the Hokage is the Hokage, and the daimyo is the daimyo. The land of fire is the land of fire, and the daimyo is the daimyo. Kurama-sani looked confused. Uchiha Shisui seemed deep in thought. Minato explained, while the village can dispatch ninja squads to guard the daimyo in rotation, for the daimyo, having his own ninja who answer directly to him is more practical. Shishi added, it's like how the Hokage has his own ANBU, rather than giving orders to use root. Kurama-sani suddenly understood. I see. Minato, however, was inwardly impressed, such sharp intuition. Before the Second Shinobi World War, there wasn't much of an issue, but after the war ended, the Hokage indeed only issued orders to root through Danzo, the leader of root, rather than directly. Of course, under normal circumstances, this was standard practice. Just as the Hokage wouldn't directly command Shishi Hashida, Uchiha Shisui or Kurama-sani to carry out a mission but would instead give orders to him as the Jonin commander unless the Jonin commander was unavailable. But now, Root and Danzo. Minato furrowed his brow in thought. At this moment, Uchiha Shisui mused aloud, it's like ninja tools borrowing someone else's is naturally not as good as having your own. Shishi nodded, exactly, and since people have thoughts of their own, they're even harder to control than tools. Minato smiled and shifted the topic, alright, that's the mission briefing. When we arrive at the daimyo's residence, do your best to make a good impression. We want the daimyo to know that Konoha's ninja are the best. Understood. Don't worry, Minato-sensei, we won't let anyone underestimate us. Although the topic had shifted, Shishi Hashida's thoughts remained focused. The daimyo wants to form ninja directly under his command. Is this the beginning of the 12 Guardian Ninja? This made Shishi think of Sarutobi Asuma. Then he remembered Sarutobi Shinoshuke. Compared to his older brother, Sarutobi Asuma indeed seemed quite rebellious. Back in the Ninja Academy, when Hiruzen Sarutobi came to lecture on the will of fire, this guy challenged him several times. But at only 5 or 6 years old, that was understandable. Wasn't Kakashi also a bit arrogant? Maybe I'm the odd one out, Shishi thought with an inward smile. By noon, the 4 of them had arrived at the daimyo's residence in the largest and most bustling city in the land of fire. The weather was clear, and the streets were lively, offering a feast for the eyes. Minato Namikaze wasn't in a hurry to meet the daimyo and took the time to stroll around with Shishi and the others, even buying various snacks. At 2 p.m., the 4 of them entered the daimyo's mansion and were introduced to the daimyo of the land of fire. Upon seeing the 4 of them, the daimyo appeared slightly displeased. Did the Hokage only send you? A young man who looked no older than 20, along with 3 children. Was the Hokage underestimating him? Brushing him off? At this moment, all 4 of them were kneeling on one knee. Upon hearing this, Minato Namikaze slightly raised his head and said, rest assured, Lord Daimyo. Shisui and the others are exceptionally skilled genin, who have previously defeated enemies in the land of rain that far outnumbered them. As for me, I am a jonin of Konoha and am willing to undergo any test Daimyo-sama deems fit. I assure you, we will not disappoint. The daimyo of the land of fire remained non-committal, responding coolly, very well then, let's put that to the test. With that, he covered his mouth with his fan and whispered some instructions to a nearby attendant. Chapter 36, Too Slow. At the daimyo's mansion, in an expansive training ground, Shishi Hashida and his team came face to face with the 6 ninja recruited by the land of fire's daimyo. All 6 were men. 2 of them were older, appearing to be in their 40s. The other 4 were slightly younger but still seemed older than Minato Namikaze, likely in their mid-20s or older. They had fierce expressions. Where did he find these rogue ninjas? Shishi silently mocked. A young man dressed in a black robe on the opposite side sneered, has Konoha run out of people? They sent a bunch of kids to assess us. He was being incredibly arrogant. A middle-aged man with a goatee beside him chuckled, don't underestimate these kids. They're from a major ninja village. If you underestimate them on the battlefield, you'll end up dead. Although his words suggested caution, Shishi could see the contempt, malice, and excitement in the man's eyes. What's wrong with being a kid? Did kids steal your milk? Kurama-sani couldn't help but clench his fists in anger. These two guys are really pissing me off. Minato Namikaze calmed him, Sani, take it easy. At that moment, another young man from the opposing group spoke, so, how are we going to start this assessment? We have 6 people. If we all go at once, it might be too much of a bully move. The black-robed youth shouted, hey, boss, if we accidentally kill them, Konoha won't come after us, will they? His words made the other 4 turn to look at their leader. The man called boss was a middle-aged man with scars on both sides of his face. He had a stern expression and mostly kept his eyes on Minato Namikaze. Hearing his subordinate's question, he responded coolly, if you don't want to die, I suggest you don't do something that's stupid. Arrogance is one thing, but don't be foolish. At this moment, the Daimyo's attendant announced in a loud voice, Namikaze-sensei, Kenichi-sensei, the exchange will be conducted in 2 phases. First, individual matches. Both sides will each send out 4 people for one-on-one matches. Second, a team battle 4 against 4. Do either of you have any objections? Minato responded, none. Kenichi also replied, none. The attendant nodded, very well, let's begin. The daimyo has declared that for each victory, the winner will receive a reward of 100,000 Ry. And each victory earns 1 point. The team with the most points at the end will be awarded a special treasure by the daimyo, a kusanagi sword from ancient times. It can cut through iron like butter and has excellent chakra conductivity. Hearing this, Kenichi's stern face finally showed a hint of seriousness. Money is important, but a good weapon is essential for survival. And even with money, it might not be possible to buy a kusanagi sword, especially one that can conduct chakra. With this in mind, Kenichi cast a cold glance at his 5 subordinates and said, take this seriously. Don't get careless, or I won't hesitate to make you pay. The 5 underlings, including the black-robed youth, immediately tensed up and dropped their playful attitudes. Boss, let me go first. The black-robed youth volunteered. Kenichi nodded slightly. On the other side, seeing the black-robed youth step forward, Minato Namikaze looked towards Uchiha Shisui. But Shishi Hashida raised his hand and said, Sensei, let me take the first match. Minato didn't refuse and nodded, alright, Shishi, you go first. Don't worry too much about winning or losing. Understood. Shishi nodded and stepped forward, pulling out a kunao, holding a senbon in his mouth, and drawing his Totsuka blade with his right hand. A kid who specializes in close combat, hey. The black-robed youth eyed Shishi, but then again, at his age, even if he's a genius, how much chakra could he possibly have for ninjutsu? Before the battle even began, the black-robed youth had already pigeonholed Shishi. It was because Shishi's stance was too well prepared. Minato Namikaze and the other 2 weren't surprised by Shishi Hashida's actions. This was his style. What he revealed was always meant to mislead the enemy. While it was true that Shishi was skilled in close combat, to someone like Uchiha Shisui, unless one possessed ultra-fast reflexes, Shishi's taijutsu and use of ninja tools would be considered subpar. However, in reality, those ultra-fast reflexes were Shishi's innate talent, something that couldn't be overlooked. He's just a kid who doesn't know how to hide his abilities. The black-robed youth inwardly mocked Shishi, but he also decided to go all out, aiming to give this kid a real shock. Of course, he was also motivated by the 100,000 Ry reward. Hey, kid, don't cry later. With a loud shout, the black-robed youth charged forward, his hands emerging from his wide sleeves, flinging several shuriken at Shishi. Shishi easily deflected them with a simple motion, not even moving an inch. Suddenly, the black-robed youth changed direction, throwing shuriken from the side. As Shishi blocked the shuriken, the youth quickly moved into his blind spot, lunging straight at him. At that moment, 2 sharp swords emerged from the youth's wide sleeves. Shishi sidestepped and fell to the ground, narrowly dodging the 2 swords that whizzed past his ears. Thud! Thud! Supporting himself with one hand, Shishi kicked at the black-robed youth's wrists. Although he didn't disarm the youth, the kick made him wince in pain and forced him to stagger backward. Flipping back onto his feet, Shishi charged at the youth with blinding speed, his arms moving like a blur as the gleam of his blade surrounded the youth. Clang! 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 The sound of clashing metal echoed, sparks flying in all directions. Too slow. Too slow. Shishi's movements grew faster with each strike, his taunts never ceasing. This kid's speed. The black-robed youth's eyes widened in shock, sweat forming on his brow. I can't keep going like this. Sensing that the situation was becoming dangerous, the youth shook his sleeves, releasing 2 plumes of black smoke that enveloped both him and Shishi. Poison gas. Kid, die. The youth laughed maniacally, as 2 chains shot out from his sleeves, wrapping around Shishi. The youth had already broken the antidote capsule hidden in his mouth, so he had no fear of the poison. Seeing Shishi holding his breath, his hands bound by the chains, the black-robed youth slowly approached. Outside, Karam-Sani was alarmed. Shishi. Minato Namikaze placed a hand on Sani's shoulder. Stay calm. Don't forget that Shishi is a medical ninja. Within the black poisonous fog, the black-robed youth suddenly froze. The Shishi he had chained up had suddenly transformed into a rabbit, easily slipping out of the chains. But how did he perform a transformation jutsu with his hands bound? Before the youth could react, the rabbit kicked off the ground, soaring into the air and dispelling the transformation to return to human form. Mid-air, Shishi, with the senbon in his mouth, swallowed an antidote pill, took a deep breath, puffed out his cheeks, and exhaled. Fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu. On the ground, the black-robed youth simultaneously finished his hand seals and unleashed a dragon-shaped flame into the sky. Boom! The flames exploded, the heatwave scattering the poison gas. But then, the black-robed youth couldn't help but exclaim in shock, how is this possible? He saw several fireballs raining down from the sky. Fire release, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Boom! 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 The black-robed youth scrambled to dodge the incoming flames. As Shishi landed on the ground, the senbon in his mouth suddenly shot out, hitting the youth who had just dodged a fireball, striking his neck with pinpoint accuracy. Clutching his neck, the black-robed youth looked at Shishi and quickly shouted, I surrender. Shishi extended his hand. The antidote. Although he had only inhaled a small amount of poison and had already taken an antidote pill with no obvious signs of poisoning, he still decided to get the antidote, just in case. Reluctantly, the black-robed youth pulled out a small box and handed it to Shishi. Shishi opened the box and saw 2 pills inside. He immediately took one and tossed it to the black-robed youth. The youth's expression soured, but he had no choice but to swallow the pill. Seeing that the black-robed youth was unharmed, Shishi nodded in satisfaction. Chapter 37, Shisui's Body Flicker Technique. Shishi Hashida's victory in the first round was a great start, earning him 100,000 RY. However, to everyone's shock, the black-robed youth was executed by Kenichi as soon as he returned. Karam-Sani was too stunned to speak. Minato Namikaze, with a serious expression, reminded them, Shisui, Sani, be careful from now on. With the opposing Jonin showing such ruthlessness, the remaining opponents would certainly fight desperately. Uchiha Shisui and Karam-Sani nodded in unison. Understood. At that moment, the bearded middle-aged man stepped forward. Minato immediately instructed, Shisui, you take this one. Yes, sensei. Uchiha Shisui moved out swiftly, leaning forward as his pace quickened, charging directly at the bearded man. Whoosh! 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 The bearded man launched shuriken as a probing attack, but Shisui effortlessly blocked and dodged them, not even activating his Sharingan. Shisui then engaged the bearded man in close combat, with their kunai clashing repeatedly, sparks flying. The 2 figures leaped and darted around the vast battlefield at high speed, their movements closely followed by Shishi and the others. Even without using his Sharingan or drawing the short sword on his back, Shisui fought the bearded man to a standstill. Suddenly, after a seamless retreat, the bearded man swiftly formed hand seals and stomped the ground with force. The ground cracked open from where the bearded man stood, rapidly spreading in all directions, with 2 fissures trapping Shisui in the center. In the next moment, sharp stone pillars erupted from the ground, converging on Shisui's position. However, Shisui, well versed in hand seals, quickly recognized that the bearded man was using an earth release jutsu and leaped into the air just in time. But then, the bearded man clasped his hands together, causing the sharp stone pillars to grow even taller. This left Shisui with no place to land. As he began to fall, Shisui completed his own hand seals. Fire release, Great Fireball Jutsu. Boom! The fireball shattered several of the sharp stone pillars into pieces. As Shisui landed, he activated his Sharingan, and the short sword on his back was drawn. But the bearded man wasn't finished. He formed more hand seals, shouting, "It's not over yet." On top of the existing stone pillars, smaller, sharper spikes emerged, lunging toward Shisui. Shisui's Sharingan whirled as he moved at high speed, slicing through the stone spikes with his short sword. At that moment, it looked as though he was dancing on the edge of a blade. Even Shishi, who was watching, couldn't help but feel a bit anxious for Shisui. The bearded man turned out to be an expert in earth-release ninjutsu, his skill at least on par with a high-level Chunin, possibly even a special J-nin. Soon, Shisui broke free from the area of the fissures and stone pillars. Even with the Sharingan, he wasn't unscathed. He had a few cuts on his body, blood trickling from them. Once out of the earth-release jutsu's range, Shisui sheathed his sword and quickly formed hand seals. Body flicker technique. Shisui's figure instantly split into two, then began to move at high speed around the battlefield, creating more and more after-images. Shishi watched in shock. This was the first time he had seen Shisui use this technique. Could this be the origin of his title, Shisui of the Body Flicker? Had he already developed this technique so soon? However, Kurama-sani, standing nearby, exclaimed in surprise, "Shadow clone, no, it's a genjutsu." Minato Namikaze confirmed, "Yes, it's indeed a genjutsu. A very advanced one at that, creating genjutsu clones. What a genius idea! Genjutsu clones?" Even Kurama-sani, who came from a clan known for genjutsu, couldn't fully grasp it at first. Illusions created by genjutsu shouldn't have physical forms, should they? Shishi Hashida pondered before asking, "Sensei, do those clones have chakra signatures?" Minato nodded. "That's correct. Among the three of them, only Minato had sensory abilities, so he could detect that the illusions, which Kurama-sani thought were mere phantoms, actually had chakra. These clones were different from ordinary illusions and not like typical clone techniques." On the stone pillars, the bearded middle-aged man was also observing Shisui Uchiha's clones. He quickly tested them by throwing shuriken. The shuriken passed through Shisui's body without causing any harm, simply going through them, yet the clones didn't dissipate. "They're not shadow clones. It's a genjutsu, isn't it?" "Typical of the Uchiha clan," the man muttered with a sneer. At this moment, the clones of Shisui began to move within the range of the earth-release jutsu. The bearded man clasped his hands together again and smirked. "Even if I can't tell which is the real one, I'll just attack them all." The stone pillars reactivated, striking through each Shisui, but every attack missed. Cold sweat dripped from the bearded man's forehead. How is this possible? Are they all illusions? Where is his real body hiding? Am I still trapped in his genjutsu? Is he just trying to exhaust my chakra? Despite attacking every Shisui, none of the strikes had any effect. By then, 3 Shisui clones had closed in on the bearded man, slashing down with their blades. The bearded man released his hands, blocking with his kunao. Clang! The attack had substance. The bearded man was in disbelief. How is this possible? Another Shisui clone's short sword came down, and he raised his other hand to block it. Clang! Again, the attack was real. The third Shisui clone's blade was now at the bearded man's neck, the cold touch sending shivers down his spine, but he still shouted, "Impossible! They're all illusions! Ha! I won't surrender!" Shisui looked at the bearded man and said, "If that's the case..." Slash! Shisui's blade cut through. The bearded man dropped his kunao, clutching his neck as blood poured out. It's real." Kurama-sani was equally stunned by what he saw. How did he do that? Could Shisui be manipulating the 5 senses to make genjutsu attacks real? Even Minato couldn't answer that question. Despite his own abilities, he hadn't fully understood Shisui's body flicker technique. Genjutsu combined with clones and the body flicker? Minato wasn't entirely sure. Shishi Hashida's knowledge couldn't compare to Minato's, but based on Minato's explanation and Shisui's performance, he also felt that the body flicker technique had a significant connection to genjutsu. But regardless, Shisui had secured the second round. After returning, Shishi immediately began treating his wounds. Next, it was Kurama-sani's turn. His opponent was a young man with a katana at his waist, more like a samurai than a ninja. Chapter 38, Yagakiga my sword. Compared to Hashida Shishi and Uchiha Shisui, Kurama Sani is a pure genjutsu type ninja. Thus, his combat style is different from the other two. Before his opponent could even reach him, he had already formed hand seals and cast a genjutsu. Genjutsu, mirage. This is a visual genjutsu that deceives the enemy's eyes, making everything they see shrouded in a false illusion. However, the young swordsman clearly had ample combat experience. After his first strike missed, he didn't wait for Kurama Sani's follow-up attack, instead, he decisively closed his eyes. Clang! Relying on his hearing, the young swordsman perfectly blocked Kurama Sani's surprise attack from behind. Kurama Sani's attack failed, and he immediately retreated, avoiding close combat. The young swordsman also acted decisively, stabbing his sword into the ground and forming hand seals to dispel the genjutsu. But Kurama Sani didn't remain idle during his retreat. Two shuriken were already flying towards the young swordsman, forcing him to dodge them and move further away from his sword, even after dispelling the genjutsu. At this moment, Kurama Sani completed his second genjutsu. Hashida Shishi couldn't recognize this technique, likely a unique genjutsu of the Kurama clan. Judging by the young swordsman's reaction, this technique clearly affected him on all fronts. Unlike the previous mirage, a visual genjutsu, this one influenced all five senses simultaneously. The young swordsman ran around erratically, muttering to himself and attacking non-existent enemies. After the technique ended, Kurama Sani was gasping for air and popped a pill into his mouth. He didn't rush to attack but waited silently for the right moment. Suddenly, the young swordsman stopped his frantic movements and locked his gaze on Kurama Sani with deadly precision. Hashida Shishi felt a twinge of unease. He's been pretending to be under the genjutsu. At this moment, Minato Namikaze spoke up, "We concede this match." That last technique was Kurama Sani's most powerful genjutsu. But since his opponent had seen through it and even used it to their advantage, there was no point in continuing the fight. It was fortunate that Kurama Sani had limited chakra. Otherwise, if he had attacked immediately after using the genjutsu, the young swordsman might have struck him down with a single blow. Kurama Sani returned with his head lowered in guilt. "Sorry, I dragged everyone down." Hashida Shishi, having just finished healing Uchiha Shisui, smiled and said, "It's not that you dragged us down, Sani. Your opponent was simply stronger." Uchiha Shisui nodded in agreement. Minato Namikaze patted Kurama Sani on the shoulder and said kindly, "Shishi is right. It's just that the opponents are different. Besides, we're still ahead by one match. Now it's time to watch your sensei." With that, Minato Namikaze stepped forward. On the opposite side, Hashida Shishi and his two teammates watched as the enemy's Jainin, Kenichi, stepped up. Jainin vs. Jainin. Hashida Shishi kept his eyes fixed on the fight, full of anticipation. He had already witnessed Minato Namikaze's Flying Thunder God technique, but he hadn't yet seen his other signature jutsu and didn't know if it had been developed yet. Suddenly, the two opponents moved simultaneously, so fast that only their after-images could be seen. So fast! Hashida Shishi gasped in amazement. Without the Ninja Tools Expert tag that enhanced his reflexes, he would have found it nearly impossible to keep up with their movements. Next to him, Uchiha Shisui had also activated his Sharingan, otherwise, he too would have struggled to follow the swift movements of Minato Namikaze and his opponent. Kurama Sani exclaimed, "They're too fast. I can't keep up at all." Hashida Shishi and Uchiha Shisui, however, kept their eyes on the battle. Cling! Clang! The sound of clashing metal wasn't frequent, but Hashida Shishi could tell that Minato Namikaze had the upper hand. Suddenly, Kenichi retreated a significant distance and quickly formed hand seals to complete a jutsu. Water release, water dragon bullet. Hashida Shishi looked up as a stream of water formed into a massive water dragon that shot into the sky, then dived down to crash towards Minato Namikaze. In response, Minato Namikaze threw a kunai straight at Kenichi. This was clearly an unexpected attack, but since Kenichi had already completed his jutsu, he easily dodged the kunai. But in the next moment, to Kenichi's shock, Minato Namikaze vanished from where he had been standing. Where did he go? Kenichi quickly scanned his surroundings, but before he could react, he felt a cold sensation on his neck. Minato Namikaze's voice echoed, "You've lost." His body froze in place, and Kenichi slowly turned his head, cold sweat dripping from his forehead. Such incredible speed! "May I ask your name?" Minato Namikaze. I'm honored to have faced you. Kenichi admitted defeat. He didn't even want to participate in the final group battle, instead choosing to leave immediately with his team and the fallen, not even bothering to say goodbye to the Daimyo of the Land of Fire. He wasn't a fool, though Minato Namikaze and his team hadn't killed anyone, they also didn't show any respect to the Daimyo. If he didn't know his place, he might not leave here alive. Watching Kenichi and his men depart, the Daimyo of the Land of Fire's expression darkened slightly. He then covered half of his face with a fan, his eyes locking onto Minato Namikaze and the other three, before giving orders to a nearby attendant, request their information from Konoha, especially on those three children. Although the Daimyo wasn't a ninja, he could tell that Minato Namikaze was the strongest among them. However, it was clear that Minato Namikaze could not be swayed. But those three children might be a different story. The attendant nodded in agreement, and the Daimyo continued, "Make sure they are well taken care of." With that, the Daimyo was carried away. Half an hour later, after bathing, Hashida Shishi and the others were treated to a grand banquet. There was not only an abundance of delicious food but also music from a band and graceful dancers performing. Unfortunately, the entertainment was lost on the four of them. Hashida Shishi and his team focused solely on the food, devouring everything in sight. After the empty dishes and cups were cleared away, and the band and dancers had left, the Daimyo's attendant arrived, bearing their previous rewards. Aside from Karam S, each of the remaining three received 100,000 Ry. Of course, the most important reward was the legendary Kusanagi sword promised by the Daimyo. Minato Namikaze reached out to accept it, thanking the attendant before drawing the sword from its sheath. Zing! The sword hummed as it was drawn. Hashida Shishi and the others observed that it was a single-edged, straight sword, approximately 80 centimeters long. The blade was silver-white, reflecting light like a mirror, but the upper part of the blade was pitch black, absorbing all light, forming a stark contrast. The Daimyo's attendant spoke, "This Kusanagi sword is called the Yagakigami sword. It is said to possess the power to control the earth, though no one has ever been able to unleash its full potential." Minato Namikaze nodded slightly and then infused the sword with chakra. Buzz! Buzz! The Yagakigami sword vibrated gently as a faint green glow appeared along the blade, its sharpness instantly increasing, sending chills down the spines of Hashida Shishi and the others. However, Minato Namikaze didn't sense any unique power within the sword, it seemed to be just an ordinary chakra blade. Sheathing the sword, Minato Namikaze said to the attendant, "Please convey our thanks to the Daimyo-sama. And also, we've completed this mission." Before Minato Namikaze could finish, the attendant quickly interrupted, "There's no need for you to rush back to Konoha, Jainin Minato. The Daimyo has ordered that you stay here until the originally scheduled time to return." Minato Namikaze could only nod helplessly, "In that case, we'll rely on your hospitality." Chapter 39, Daimyo-sama, please invest in me. After the attendant left, Minato Namikaze looked at Hashida Shishi and the other two, holding the Yagakigami sword in his hand. Uchiha Shisui was the first to speak up, "Sensei Minato, I'm more suited to a short sword." Minato Namikaze then turned his gaze to Hashida Shishi. Hashida Shishi shrugged and said, "Sensei Minato, my Tostuka is also a chakra blade. Besides, the credit for this mission goes mostly to you, Minato-sensei." Uchiha Shisui and Kurama-sani both nodded in agreement. Minato Namikaze smiled wryly. Having such considerate subordinates can be a bit of a dilemma. Since he didn't use swords or blades himself, he thought for a moment and said, "In that case, I'll hold on to it for now." Then, Minato Namikaze changed the subject, "We should have some downtime in the coming days. Starting tomorrow, we'll resume our previous training." "Yes, Minato-sensei." Back at their quarters, Hashida Shishi took out the scroll that Minato Namikaze had given him earlier and spread it open. Konoha-style Kenjutsu came into view. It started with the most basic sword techniques, complete with diagrams and detailed explanations. Hashida Shishi focused intently, committing each move to his memory palace. Soon, his eyes fell on the final technique. Leaf-style dance of the crescent moon. Hashida Shishi was all too familiar with this move. It would one day become the signature technique of Heiatgek, who famously used it to strike down Tsunagaku Jainin Baki, only to be countered and killed by Baki's wind release prowess. Clearly, the most critical aspect of the Konoha-style Kenjutsu described in this scroll was this ultimate technique. It involved the user and two shadow clones attacking simultaneously. The description seemed simple, but the detailed explanation that followed was highly complex. It wasn't the execution of the technique that was complicated, but the timing, speed, angle of the attacks, and the coordination between the shadow clones and the user. These were all crucial details. Hashida Shishi was completely engrossed in studying it. The next day, Hashida Shishi officially began his focused training in Konoha-style Kenjutsu. During his breaks, he continued experimenting on various small animals to improve his medical ninjutsu skills. Before this mission, he had learned a new medical ninjutsu from Nono Yakushi. Birang technique, delicate illness extraction technique. This technique allows the user to remove toxins and transplant organs within the body. The days of training were far from dull for Hashida Shishi because he could feel his progress every single day. It wasn't just his Konoha-style Kenjutsu and medical ninjutsu improving, but also his chakra reserves, strength, and attack speed. Even Minato Namikaze and Uchiha Shisui could clearly sense the increase in his strength and attack speed. On top of that, the Daimyo of the Land of Fire was providing them with excellent food and drink every day, and they didn't have to spend a single RY. Time flew by, and 7 days quickly passed. On the night before they were scheduled to leave the Daimyo's residence, Hashida Shishi was suddenly summoned by the Daimyo of the Land of Fire. This surprised everyone. Minato Namikaze smiled and said, "Since the Daimyo has summoned you, Shishi, you should go." Hashida Shishi nodded and followed the attendant. He had already guessed the reason behind the Daimyo's summons. Out of the 4 of them, he was the most likely to be recruited due to his background. After all, Minato Namikaze was already a Jonin with deep ties to Konoha. Uchiha Shisui came from the prestigious Uchiha clan, and Kurama Sani's origins were also notable, the once famous Kurama clan. Only Hashida Shishi had lost his parents early and grew up in an orphanage, making him seem like an easy target for recruitment and brainwashing. And sure enough, when Hashida Shishi met the Daimyo of the Land of Fire, he was showered with praise. A lesser kid might have been completely flattered by this. Moreover, the Daimyo didn't immediately try to recruit him. Instead, after praising Hashida Shishi, he started talking about the current system in the ninja world, how each village was guided by the Daimyo, how the Hokage was appointed by the Daimyo, and how the Daimyo was the real power behind everything. Hashida Shishi nodded obediently, but internally he was thinking, joining you is worse than joining Denzo. After a lengthy lecture, the Daimyo, satisfied with Hashida Shishi's compliant nods, finally left. The attendant who remained then extended an olive branch. "Hashida Shishi, would you be willing to become the Daimyo's personal guardian ninja?" Without hesitation, Hashida Shishi nodded, "Of course. The Daimyo can directly order the 3rd Hokage to transfer me to the Daimyo's residence." The attendant was taken aback and then clarified, "What I mean is, would you be willing to leave Konoha and become the Daimyo's personal guardian ninja?" Hashida Shishi shook his head and asked, "With my current strength, could I defend against a Jonin like Kenichi?" The attendant shook his head. Hashida Shishi continued, "Then even if I became the Daimyo's personal guardian ninja, I wouldn't be able to protect him." The attendant frowned, "But you have exceptional talent, you're a genius of Konoha." Hashida Shishi asked again, "Can the Daimyo provide me with ninjutsu?" The attendant shook his head. Hashida Shishi then asked, "Does the Daimyo have a Jonin like Minato-sensei who can guide me in my training?" The attendant shook his head again. Hashida Shishi spread his hands, "In that case, what use would it be for me to join the Daimyo now? I wouldn't be able to fulfill the role of protecting the Daimyo." The attendant nodded, acknowledging the logic. Before he could ask what to do next, Hashida Shishi continued, "Therefore, the Daimyo should fully support my development in Konoha, allowing me to grow into a Jonin who can stand on his own. Only then will I be able to serve the Daimyo effectively. And at that time, as a Jonin, I could help train even more ninjas for the Daimyo. After all, raising a ninja requires not just money, but various ninjutsu resources." The attendant nodded solemnly, "You make a very good point. I will report this to the Daimyo immediately. Please wait here." With that, the attendant hurriedly left. In the Daimyo's chambers, after hearing the attendant's report, the Daimyo smiled, as expected of a genius, "He's absolutely right. Let's fully support this Hashida Shishi." The attendant hesitated for a moment and then said, "Daimyo-sama, this Hashida Shishi is very clever. It's hard to predict what might happen in the future. What if he betrays you?" The Daimyo replied calmly, "So what? What I'm spending is just a bit of money. Can 30 million RY buy a Jonin who is completely loyal to me? Can 100 million RY buy a Jonin who is completely loyal to me? Even if he betrays me in the future, it would just be a loss of 30 million or 100 million RY, which is nothing compared to what we give to Konoha. The attendant quickly responded, Daimyo-sama is wise. The daimyo chuckled and said, however, we shouldn't stop recruiting ninjas from outside. Also, this kid's suggestion is excellent. From now on, inform Konoha regularly to send young ninjas to the daimyo's residence. Preferably geniuses. The attendant quickly bowed, yes, Daimyo-sama. End of chapter. Sparkle sparkle sparkle. As promised, once we reach the milestone, I will upload the bonus chapters. This week gonna be a mass upload of 20 chaps / this week. Though the upload rate per day depends on power stones. Also, I added the romance and harem tag, so if anyone wants to quit is best time. Otherwise, enjoy the story. Support me on Patreon, read up to chapter 85 plus there. Patreon.com/redx43. Chapter 40, The Pioneer. In Minato Namikaze's room, a stack of large denomination money bills lay on the table. Hashida Shishi had brought them back. Minato glanced at the money, then looked at Hashida Shishi. The daimyo wants to recruit you. Shishi nodded and then recounted the entire process. Minato listened, wide-eyed and astonished. After some thought, he finally said, a double agent. Shishi stroked his chin, deep in thought. That could actually work. He hadn't originally considered becoming a double agent. He was just trying to scam the daimyo for some investment, planning to grab some resources from Hiruzen Sarutobi when he returned to Konoha. It was a way to exploit the underlying power struggle between Konoha and the daimyo for his own benefit. Minato, who wasn't lacking in political awareness and was trained in the Hokage's mindset, considered the situation. If the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, were in his place, he probably wouldn't let this opportunity slip by, likely assigning Shishi as a double agent. Minato thought it over and said, keep this money for yourself, but don't tell anyone else. When we get back to Konoha, I'll personally explain the situation to the third Hokage. Understood. Shishi nodded and put the money away, but he didn't leave. Instead, he pulled out a scroll, opened it, and smiled. Minato-sensei, I designed a technique here. Since it involves the brain, I haven't dared to try it yet. A technique? Minato was surprised, then took the scroll and examined it carefully. The technique wasn't complex, in fact, it was quite simple for him, but the concept was remarkably clever. Looking up at Shishi, Minato's surprise deepened. I didn't expect you to be skilled in curse seals and sealing techniques as well. Shishi bashfully responded, I learned while making explosive tags. I've developed a unique memory technique that I call the Memory Palace. Shishi explained to Minato, due to my training with shadow clones, I had the idea to create this technique. Minato nodded. So, you're trying to have the memories brought back by the shadow clones directly enter your memory palace through this technique, avoiding any mental shock or confusion. You're aiming to accumulate training experience through your shadow clones. Shishi nodded. Minato immediately cautioned, remember, the memories brought back by the shadow clones are just one aspect. You also need to be wary of the accumulated fatigue. A person's capacity to endure is limited. Shishi quickly assured, don't worry, Minato-sensei, I'll be careful. Minato, trusting in Shishi's steady nature, didn't press further. Instead, he continued asking about the details of the memory palace while re-examining the technique on the scroll. It's impressive, Shishi, that you're using the entire village of Konoha as the container for your memories. That's a brilliant idea. Incorporating genjutsu could make it even better. Yes, and it should be based on chakra, supplemented with sealing techniques, almost like constructing a library. Even though the technique itself is simple, the fact that you could devise something like this just from studying explosive tags shows you have exceptional talent in sealing techniques. Minato Namikaze wrote and revised, making adjustments as he went along. What had originally been a simple technique designed by Shishi rapidly became more complex, changing right before his eyes. After about 2 hours, Minato set down his brush and smiled, there, this should do it. With your chakra capacity, Shishi, you shouldn't have any trouble using it. Of course, to maintain the seal, you'll need to continuously channel chakra, which will be a drain on your reserves. Shishi looked at the technique, now vastly more intricate than before, and scratched his head. He sighed, Minato-sensei, I think it's going to take me some time to fully grasp this. Minato chuckled, sorry, I got a bit carried away. But don't worry, if you run into any issues, feel free to ask me anytime. Yes, it's getting late, and we've got a long journey tomorrow. Let's save this for when we get back to Konoha. Shishi nodded, gathered his things, and bid farewell to Minato before heading back to his room. Lying on his bed, Shishi's attention shifted to his tag tree in his mind. Just now, 2 new tag had been triggered. Tag, Sealing Expert. Condition to obtain, complete the training of the secret technique Memory Palace, perfected by Minato Namikaze. Effect, increases talent in sealing techniques and curse seals by 100%, and boosts memory by 100%. The requirement didn't seem too difficult, and the tag's effects weren't bad either. As for memory, though Shishi prided himself on having an excellent memory, he wasn't quite at the level of photographic recall, so the Memory Palace technique was essential. Doubling his memory might just push him to that level. This would obviously enhance his ability to perceive, learn, and perform at his peak during actual combat. Having a talent for sealing techniques means I should take them seriously. After all, they're an incredibly versatile skill. However, Shishi remained clear-headed. At this stage, sealing techniques weren't a top priority. His focus was still on swordsmanship and medical ninjutsu. These were the skills he relied on for survival and establishing himself. Next, he examined the second tag. Tag, Pioneer. Condition to obtain, develop at least 5A rank or higher ninja techniques, including but not limited to ninjutsu, sealing techniques, genjutsu, taijutsu, etc. If others assist, the user must play a key, innovative role in the development. Effect, once per year, the user gains a flash of insight for 10 minutes. During this period, comprehension and creativity are maxed out. Shishi sat up abruptly. 2 maxed out stats, an irresistible temptation. But developing 5A rank or higher techniques, be they ninjutsu, sealing techniques, genjutsu, was no small feat. The Chidori is A rank difficulty, and so is the Raise Nan. Tisk, this won't be easy. Even if Minato-sensei hasn't developed the Raise Nan yet, it won't be simple to replicate and claim credit for it. And then there's Kakashi's Chidori. First, I'd have to master the lightning release chakra nature transformation. The wind release, Rasen Shuriken could also count. Shishi pondered, a key, innovative role. I wonder if coming up with the idea and having someone else assist in the development would count. Looks like this will require some trial and error. Shishi lay back down and slowly drifted off to sleep. The next day, the group left the Daimyo's residence and returned to Konoha around noon. In the Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi listened to Minato Namikaze's report, including the comments Shishi had made on the way to the Daimyo's mansion. Of course, the most important part was the Daimyo's attempt to recruit Shishi and how Shishi responded. After the report, Minato said, Shishi is incredibly smart, with an exceptionally keen sense of political awareness. He recognized the divide between the village and the Daimyo's office as soon as he heard the mission details. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. This was evident from Shishi's words and actions. Not only that, but he's also a staunch supporter of the Hokage. Hiruzen was quite pleased with this and smiled. Shishi handled it very well. It's rare to see someone so young respond so flexibly. As for the money, let Shishi keep it. Now, about making him a double agent. Minato, what do you think? Shishi was, after all, under Minato's command, so as Hokage. Hiruzen felt it was necessary to consider Minato's opinion. Moreover, Hiruzen was keen on grooming Minato as well. It was becoming clear that Tsunade had little interest in succeeding as the 4th Hokage, and Jiraiya, ever the wanderer, was lost in his own destiny, not having returned since the Second Shinobi World War. Rumor had it he was training some disciples in the Land of Rain. Orochimaru had originally been a promising candidate, but he had changed too much since the war. All these factors forced Hiruzen to reconsider his options. Minato, anticipating Hiruzen's inquiry, had already formed a plan. He responded, I believe Shishi is well suited for this task. He's very disciplined, has a strong will, and firmly upholds the will of fire, dedicated to protecting Konoha and the Hokage. Despite his young age, his mind is mature, and I don't foresee any risk of betrayal while serving as a double agent. Hiruzen nodded and then said, in that case, you'll be the one to relay this mission to Shishi. You'll also be his point of contact. Minato immediately accepted the order, yes, Lord Third.
Thanks for listening.